After nearly a full decade, Stranger Things has finally ended with 42 episodes across 5 seasons. What started as a pretty simple show about a missing kid rapidly grew into the most popular series on the planet, and the show's scale grew alongside it, for better or worse. Stranger Things is a special show for me, as I started watching it pretty early in its life, and there's no show I've kept up with for as long as this one. That's mostly thanks to the last few seasons taking an eternity to release, but regardless, Stranger Things is one of my favourite shows, and now that the final season's done and dusted, I can finally do what I've been wanting to for the past 3 years, rank every episode in one epic video. I have a lot to say if you couldn't tell by the runtime, so make sure you have some Eggos or something to keep you going. Obviously there'll be spoilers for every single aspect of Stranger Things, including the finale. Without further ado, let's get this party started. Number 42, The Lost Sister. A surprise to absolutely no one, The Lost Sister is the worst episode of Stranger Things, despite IMDb trying to convince you otherwise. This episode takes us away from the exciting shit happening in Hawkins, is boring, has terrible new characters, and leaves next to zero impact on the show, meaning you can skip it and miss basically nothing. Well, at least you could until they decided to drudge up that character again in the final season. We'll save that for later and just focus on what we have, which isn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but certainly isn't good. Elle's storyline prior to this episode was already starting to become the weak link of the season, with her solo adventure to find her mum being fine, but once again not really having any impact on her character growth. So spending an entire episode of her probably wasn't the best idea from the jump, but hey, if it's good, I can't really knock it. I do like Elle getting to explore the big city, which could lead to some cute character moments, but she finds Carly and the gang pretty much instantly, so no chance for that to happen. The only scene I really like is Elle getting a makeover, but it also starts the bitchin' thing, which gets annoying fast.
Bitchin'. Bitchin', right?
Yeah, bitchin'.
The main conflict is that Elle doesn't want to kill people, including bad guys, which would be a good struggle for her if it weren't for the countless times before and after this where she kills plenty of people without giving a shit. Sure, those people usually deserved it, but it still makes this concept ring hollow. As for the Lost Sister herself, the character leaves a lot to be desired. She doesn't really have any memorable traits, and the actress who plays her is honestly terrible. I like her look, and that's about it. The rest of her crew are also completely useless. The one other highlight is Matthew Modine showing up to remind us how cool he is, and I guess you can call that foreshadowing for season 4 if you want to. I don't really want to dwell on this episode, we all know it's bad, and I'd much rather move on to talk about the real stuff. So why don't we do that? Number 41.
Susie, you copied?
So with The Lost Sister out of the way, we can start talking about the real episodes, and I'm starting off with a bunch of season 3 stuff. The third installment has its fans, and I was one of them when it first came out, but over the years, and especially on this last rewatch, I've soured on it a lot. As soon as you start this season, you can tell things are off. Pretty much all the characters are acting like cartoon versions of themselves, or have regressed majorly from when we last saw them. Some don't suffer too much from this, like Dustin and Steve, who are probably the only 2 characters who feel about on track. Many characters have nothing going on, but at least aren't offensively bad, like Lucas, Will, Max, Eleven, Nancy, and Jonathan. Mike has downgraded quite significantly from the main character he was in the first 2 installments, but I can accept his immaturity in this season since he's going through his toxic male arc, and still has plenty of good scenes leading the group and whatnot. The serious offenders are the adults. It's going to become increasingly apparent throughout the show that the Duffers have no idea what to do with Joyce that isn't entirely Will-centric. Season 3, they decide to go all in on the Joppa romance, which was teased a bit in the earlier seasons. I think this is a fine decision for a character because Winona and David do have good chemistry, but from this point on, that's all the material Joyce will be given until the end of the show. This episode has one good scene with her eating dinner by herself, depressed about Bob, and from then on it's just wacky shenanigans with her magnets. Joyce was basically the beating heart of the first season, and it's a shame to watch her become increasingly more irrelevant as the show progresses. But the real worst character this season is none other than Jim Hopper. Maybe the best character of the first 2 installments, Hopper has now been reduced to a cartoonish dumbass who constantly pines over Joyce and loves to beat people up. All his scenes in this first episode are just terrible. He needs Joyce's advice on talking to Mike and Elle, and sure, Hopper isn't the most emotionally mature guy in the world, but he showed real growth last season with Elle, and this is now 8 months past that. His scene where he trolls Mike into thinking his grandma is dead is funny, but also feels so out of character considering we've seen Hopper does care about Mike, even if they don't fully get along. But my problems with Hopper extend far beyond this episode, so let's move on. Continuing with things I hate, the Duffers decide to continue the highly questionable Billy and Karen sex thing from season 2, which was a funny scene in a vacuum, but it kinda sums up one of the Duffers' worst traits, which is listening way too much to the audience's reactions. Season 1, everyone was super attached to Barb, even though she was in like 2 episodes, so they made Nancy's entire plot in season 2 be justice for Barb. Erica was kind of funny in like 2 scenes, so they made her a main character. Steve and Dustin were the breakout duo of season 2, so now they'll be tied at the hip for the rest of the show. That last one isn't really a bad thing, but the point I'm making is that the Duffers seem to always be trying to appease the fans and always go way too far. In this episode, the mums of Hawkins line up at the pool to ogle at Billy, who looks 30 but is supposed to be like fresh 18, and Karen takes up his offer to go fuck in a hotel room. Sure, she doesn't end up going, but seriously, what were the Duffers thinking? Alright, but enough hating, there are things to like about this season. For one thing, the cinematography, color grading, costume design, and sets all got a shot of adrenaline up the arse, so this is the most colorful, eye-catching season of them all. Everything about it from a visual standpoint is a total 10 out of 10. This is the last season to be helmed by the original cinematographer Tim Ives, and he really went out with a bang. You could argue that the more grounded look of the other seasons is more appropriate, but considering the tone of this season is much less serious, the over-the-top sets and costumes fit perfectly. The first scene at the Starcourt Mall is easily my favorite of the episode, seeing the kids go through this incredibly decorated set with a banging tune by the composers. As always, it's great to see the party hanging out together, and this is the season where they're together the most, other than Dustin, who's going to be off doing some bullshit. Thankfully, they're all together for like 2 scenes in this episode. Last thing to touch on is Jonathan and Nancy, who get pretty short-changed this season. They spend the first few episodes on a little detective mission, except the mystery isn't that engaging, and there isn't really any good character stuff. Nancy has to deal with dumb men at her job, but there isn't much resolution of this because they all end up turning into goop. So yeah, from the very first episode, season 3 isn't really impressing me, but the silver lining is that it does get better from here. Number 40. E pluribus unum. Continuing the season 3 hate train, this episode is easily the one that I forget the most every time I revisit, which is probably because basically nothing happens. The best plot is everything with Steve and Robin. First off, the interrogation, which is pretty amusing, and then more importantly afterwards when they're tied up in that room. This part where Robin talks about how she apparently was obsessed with Steve in high school is fantastic, and lays the groundwork for an amazing rug pull in the next episode. Mike and Elle and their merry band of rejects spend the episode hanging out at the cabin after mauling that Mind Flayer creature, which much like the majority of Elle's action this season is her throwing it around with no real tension or anything. I'm glad they took away her powers at the end of this installment because I was starting to get pretty bored with the same rigmarole over and over. Elle needs to find where Billy is hiding, so goes into his mind, which is maybe my least favorite scene of the season. The Duffers decided they wanted Billy to have a tragic, redemptive death, and their brilliant plan for that was to introduce this incredibly corny bit where we see him as a kid getting abused by his dad. I hate the concept of redeeming Billy to begin with, considering he had about 0 good qualities from the jump. I'll save the real complaining for the Battle of Starcourt, so I'll just say that Dacre Montgomery is doing incredible work with the shoddy material he was given and move on. Hopper and Joyce spend the whole episode at Murray's Goon Cave learning information from Alexei that we already know. It's hard to be invested in this Russian plot when the Duffers laid out all their cards from the very first scene of the season. It's also around this time where the Hopper-Joyce lovers quarrel thing is really starting to grate on me, so there's basically nothing here to latch onto. Alexei is funny, I guess. Number 39. The Bridge. Our first episode of season 5 isn't as terrible as people say, but it still has some really questionable shit. I'm gonna jump right in with Will's coming out, which was a long time coming, but completely missed the mark. It's a pretty sensitive topic, and the Duffers clearly wanted to treat it with the gravity it deserves, but instead of this being an intimate moment between Will and his closest companions like Mike, Joyce, and Jonathan, they decided to have literally every character plus your father's brother's cousin's former roommate there for it. They have fucking Murray and Amabeth McNutty and 11's sister there, people who have literally never talked to Will before, and the scene just goes on for so long, it makes sense why it took them 12 hours to shoot it. I think the dialogue is okay, but once again just ruined by all the randos being there and the fact that this scene is right before their mission into the Upside Down, making the sense of urgency completely vanish. It really should have just been the characters who hugged him plus Joyce. The best scene of the episode is the very first when Max wakes up, which is great because it's two characters we both care about, played by fantastic actors who are actually trying. Once again, it's kind of ruined by the other random characters who are there, mainly Mike's mum, who has zero reason to be witnessing any of this, and they totally fumbled Elle's reaction to Max being back.
You're here. You're really here.
Hopper's there too, and Max doesn't seem to have any thoughts on the fact that this guy who she thought exploded 2 years ago is standing in front of her. The song choice is also a bit weird. It's that Moby song once again, which was already repeated last season when Max died. It makes sense to play it considering this is a very similar situation, but happier. But I really would have preferred if they could find some new music instead of constantly recycling the same hits over and over again. All the Max stuff in this episode is really cute, and I'm glad her and Lucas get their happy ending, even if we had to go through a lot of bullshit to get there. It is weird that Max and Will get a better reunion than Elle, considering we've never seen these two have a one-on-one conversation before. The rest of the episode is just the gang all reconvening and then figuring out their plan of attack for the finale. I usually love shit like this, seeing the characters come together at the end of a season was always a highlight, but it wasn't really hitting the same this time. For one thing, this is the first time we've had the whole cast together in the same room, and it really hammers home that there is way too many redundant characters. The cast is big enough as is, and now we're dragging Mr. Clark and Vicky and Elle's sister into it. Anytime there's a shot of everyone standing there, it just looks ridiculous. And a lot of these people haven't even talked to each other before, nor do they have any kind of new insight to add to the group. There's also been so much planning using physical objects this season that it was getting beyond tired at this point. Speaking of Steve, the other best scene in the episode is his makeup with Dustin. I wasn't huge on them hating on each other this season, but their fight and shock jock followed by them coming back together in this episode made it worth it. Their dynamic was becoming played out by season 4 if you ask me, so changing it up was definitely a good choice. It felt really nice to see them talk about the past and that they missed each other, and Dustin passing on Eddie's spear to Steve was a really good touch. And the music during this scene also slaps. Last thing I want to mention is that the ending didn't really get me massively hyped for the finale in the same way previous ones did. The Epic Journey remix in Papa was cringe, but the rest of that episode really felt like it was building to the endgame. Same with season 1 and 2. This one, maybe it's because their plan wasn't that cool, but there wasn't really anything that had me thinking, oh, I can't wait to see that in the finale. This episode could have been so much more, but it's not offensively terrible or anything. Number 38. The Flayed. This episode suffers from that middle season slump that basically all of them fall into. It goes all in on the worst of a wacky season 3 crap, with the Scoops gang successfully infiltrating a Russian base and the rest of the party just kind of fucking around. Somehow the Scoops plot is the best part of the episode, because while it is utterly ludicrous that our wacky gang is sneaking around an underground neon Russian base, it's also pretty damn entertaining, I can't lie. And at least these characters aren't flanderized versions of themselves. The elevator scene with Steve crashing out at Erica is really funny, and it's cool to see Steve win a fight, although it'd be better if it was against someone we actually knew. But beyond that, I just enjoy these characters together. Speaking of cartoonish nonsense, the Joyce and Hopper plot starts to pick up a bit of steam with the introduction of everyone's favorite disposable Russian, Alexei. Of the show's several kill characters, Alexei is easily the least engaging. He's got basically nothing going on except being funny and a kinda cute dynamic with Murray. Hopper and Joyce are still just nothing characters constantly arguing and being annoying, but I will admit the scene where Jim commandeers Todd's vehicle and calls Smirnoff a child murderer is pretty funny.
I know he doesn't look it, but he is one of the most dangerous men in the world. He's murdered many children.
And then we have a return of Murray, who in this group somehow ends up being the least terrible character, mainly because he's usually trying to put a stop to Jim and Joyce's bullshit. This episode is also when the Russian Terminator becomes a real threat, who is a laughably stupid character who solely exists to give Hopper someone to fight repeatedly. And taking the cake for lamest plotline this episode is the kids and teens.
Not now, Mom!
Nancy and Jonathan link up with a party, so now we have an even bigger group of characters with nothing to do.
Not now, Mom!
Jonathan also apologizes to Nancy for being a bad boyfriend, and she doesn't apologize at all for getting them fired and not acknowledging their class divide that Jonathan pointed out before. This conflict is never mentioned again. And then a big fleshy monster shows up, which I'm sorry, but this is the lamest monster of a week this show ever came up with. None of the action in the hospital does anything for me, and it's hard to feel any tension when I know these characters have a 0% chance of dying. Number 37. The Mall Rats. This episode is very similar to the opener of the season, but better in every way. It establishes the character groupings we're going to be running with for most of the season, with the standouts being Steve and Dustin back together, and Max and Eleven becoming friends. It's cool that with each season, Elle gets paired with a new character to bring out a different aspect of her personality. First with Mike, then Hopper, and now Max giving her that much needed female perspective. The Material Girl montage is awesome, and 11 dumping Mike's ass is one of her best moments.
I dump your ass.
Also love this Steve bit, which is like the only time those characters interact.
Wait a second. Are you even allowed to be here? Dad. Okay.
Speaking of Steve, this episode formally introduces us to the power trio of him, Dustin, and new kid on the block, Robin. She's easily the second best character introduced after the first season, behind Max. Maya Hawke embodies her so perfectly that it's like they specifically wrote the role for her. She becomes a bit bastardized in later installments, but here in her first appearance, she's a great character and rounds out the dynamic of her and the boys really well. Some of her funniest bits are in this episode, when it's just the three of them trying to decipher the Russian code.
I'm fluent in 4 languages, you know.
Russian?
Uye arye umbade.
Holy shit.
That was pig Latin, dingus.
I don't know why Dustin thought Steve would be at all useful with Russian translation, but I do like the detail of Steve immediately noticing the music, proving that he can be useful in his own way. As for Hopper, he's still a joke character with none of the depth he had previously, but at least in this episode he has some genuinely funny moments. I love him singing along to the gym song after successfully trolling 11, and him getting drunk after Joyce stands him up is pretty amusing too. Only other thing to mention is Billy's no good, very bad day after he gets mind-fucked by the Upside Down. It's commendable that the man's still going to work despite being possessed by hell itself, but this scene where he kills Karen only for it to be a dream sequence thing is really bad. Not much else to say, it still has all the tone problems of season 3, but the character stuff is a lot better than usual.
Mom, get off the phone!
Number 36.
Vecna's curse.
Time for season 4, which many including myself considered a redemption for the show after the third installment was a total sham. All the episodes of this season are good, but I'm singling this one out as the worst because it just goes on for way too long. Being long and bloated isn't something exclusive to this episode, it applies to the whole season, but this one justifies the excessive 77-minute runtime the least. A lot of good investigating going on, and man does it feel good to have an actual compelling mystery again after the last season. Anytime the family video squad is on screen is when the episode is at its best, and the end scene where Dustin and Eddie exposit about Vecna while we see the man himself hanging out in his evil haunted house is stupendous. Everything about Vecna and his lair is so cool. I love that he lives in a creepy mansion surrounded by bats. As for the California crew, Joyce and Murray's plot is pretty nothing, basically just them calling the phone number and finding out Hopper is in fact in Russia, which we already know thanks to the various scenes showing us exactly that. Jonathan and Argyle have another nothing scene where John complains about having to go to college with his hot girlfriend. Jonathan's arc this season would be a lot better if we didn't have to wait until halfway through the next season to have an actual conclusion to it. Mike's now joined the Cali crew of rejects for a whole bunch of awkward scenes. I do like most of his stuff, but it's a shame to see my number one boy acting so passively these days. This bit with him and Will is a good scene, but I'm distracted by how atrocious Mike's haircut is. All the stuff in the roller rink is excellent though. The entire town ganging up on Elle is so ridiculously evil that I love it, and the chick playing Angela absolutely understands the assignment. Millie Bobby Brown is fantastic not just in this episode, but the whole season. Her best stuff is still to come, but I love the scene where she's getting surrounded by everyone and breaking down, and of course when she smacks Angela with the skate. Perhaps the most justified assault in history. One thing slightly dragging it down is a problem I have with the entire show, which is the need to excessively show flashbacks every time there's a line or visual that calls back to a previous episode. It's always been in the show, but I swear it just gets worse each season. It's like the Duffers can't trust the audience to remember things, which is probably accurate since most people who watch the show are probably on their phone the entire time. Lastly, a not small portion of this episode is dedicated to catching us up on Hopper's new life in Russia, which is the worst plotline of the season and maybe the whole show. As soon as I found out Hopper was in fact not dead, I was extremely skeptical as to whether they'd be able to justify bringing him back. Well, spoiler alert, they don't. Hopper's storyline throughout this entire season is pointless, and ends up just bringing him back to where he was pre-death. And then he does fuck all in season 5, so I'm left wondering what the point of any of this was. But I'm gonna save a real complaining for when we get to the season 3 finale. Number 35. The Dive. This episode is mostly good, but suffers from the usual season 4 bloat and several plotlines stagnating because the Duffers want everything to go off in episode 7. The Hawkins plot is doing the heavy lifting as always, with the gang regrouping and trying to figure out their next move after the latest Vecna kill. This is also when Eddie finally gets off the bench and joins the team proper. I like the scene in the woods where all the characters' different perspectives help to advance the plot, and this whole squad is just a really fun group.
Eddie's still a wanted man. We can't just go for a hike in the woods.
The last scene where Steve goes underwater to find the gate is also great, especially this shot where he's pulled into the Upside Down. And then there's Jason rallying the town against the Hellfire Club, which is a fun development that sadly doesn't go anywhere. It's just a bit weird that after this season there's zero mention of this witch hunt again, beyond Dustin getting beat up. The guy who plays Jason though, he is fantastic in this role, and I find him a way more compelling villain than Billy ever was. Everything not in Hawkins leaves something to be desired. The 11 plot, even with some good scenes, is literally treading water, with Brenner basically saying to the audience, you gotta wait till the next episode for the real good stuff. If it weren't for Millie, Matthew, and Jamie all being spectacular actors, this lab plot would drag pretty hard. Meanwhile, the rest of the Cali crew is on a wacky side quest to get Susie's help to find Elle, and while I do like Susie, I really do, this whole segment is just too silly. It does have the one time Argyle was actually funny, that being his infatuation with Eden, but the rest is stupid and way too self-aware.
It's a unique numerical label given to all information technology connected to the internet.
What's the internet?
Don't worry about it. It's just gonna change the world.
The Russia plot is extremely slow this episode, with this storyline that really only had enough material for half a season, trying desperately to stretch itself out for the entire runtime. Joyce and Murray fuck around with Yuri, and Hopper spends the whole episode eating lunch. His monologue about the Demogorgon is pretty cool, David Harbour trying his best to give this plot some life, but it's in service of nothing. Number 34. Will the Wise. Alright, it's time for Season 2 proper, which has a very special place in my heart since I first watched the show right after it came out. But taking my nostalgia out of the equation, I still think Season 2 is an excellent continuation that feels pretty seamless outside of a couple bad things. This episode, like the rest of the season, is good and has plenty to love, but is dragged down just a bit by being sort of an in-betweener episode. Most of it is spent with our characters reacting to what's been going on previously and figuring out their next move, but there's still some really great stuff. The best bit is Hopper and Elle's big fight, which is maybe their best scene together of the whole show. David and Millie are both incredible, the dialogue is fantastic, and I love Hopper's reaction to Elle comparing him to Papa.
You are like Papa!
Really? I'm like that psychotic son of a bitch.
The part afterward where you can see Hopper regretting his actions and almost reaching out before shutting down is great stuff too. The writers definitely struck gold pairing these two together for the season. The weakest stuff is everything going on with Will, who's now got the mind flayer in him and acting like a weirdo. Noah Schnapp is doing quality work. This is easily his strongest season, but it feels a bit repetitive for Will to be in Upside Down related troubles 2 seasons in a row. They do a season 1 retread and have Joyce cover the house of Will's vine drawings in an attempt to replicate the magic of the Christmas lights. It feels a bit cheap, but I do like Bob helping them out with it in the next episode. The ending with Hopper discovering the tunnels is a super cool stinger, and I love every time they do the rotating camera thing. Nancy and Jonathan are off doing their Justice for Barb plot, which I've already complained about, but I do like those two characters together, and obviously the chemistry is off the charts. Also like the scene of the boys talking about the situation. I just always like Mike taking charge, even if it does mean he's a dick to Max in the process. Once he goes to join the Will plot, it does mean he's effectively benched until the party reunion in episode 8, which is a shame because I was really liking their new dynamic with Max and Will. Number 33. Shock Jock. The opening of Volume 2 is carried by the squad investigating Hawkins' lab. I always like when a show or movie returns to a familiar location near the end of the story to uncover some new revelations, but on top of that, the character stuff is really strong. Steve and Dustin have their big fight, which is easily one of the best scenes of the season. I really love Steve calling out Eddie's bullshit death. Maybe a bit out of pocket, but he was spitting facts regardless.
Eddie wanted to play hero, and he made a dumb call, and he got himself killed.
Also like seeing Nancy and Jonathan finally stop beating around the bush with their relationship issues, even though that isn't really the focus until next episode. Also, Nancy immediately deciding to shoot the supposed shield generator seems pretty stupid. And you can clearly hear Dustin sounding distressed through the walkie, so why the fuck wouldn't you guys wait?
Just listen to me, okay? Don't do anything! Don't touch it!
The other side of the Upside Down plot is what drags this episode down, that being the proper return of the Lost Sister. The Elle and Hopper plot was already the shittiest part of Season 5 by far, and now it's made even worse by most of this episode being dedicated to catching us up on Carly's backstory, and establishing her new plan to kirk herself with Elle. I wasn't on board with the idea of bringing 8 back into the story, but I suppose it could have been a chance to redeem that character and give her some actual purpose. But she only makes the season worse than it already is, and ultimately could have been left out with not much changing. This episode also continues the Holly and Max plot, which is boring outside of their scene with delightful Derek.
Mike.
Mike?
My brother Mike? He's like my best friend now.
You're best friends with Mike.
And also Will and Lucas and Erica and Mrs. Byers and Miss Robin.
The end of the episode provides a pretty good opportunity to wrap it up and get Max out of the dream world, but they had to delay it to the next episode, which ends up making this plotline feel like spinning wheels for most of it. All of these scenes of them going through memories are pretty lame, considering we already saw the exact same concept last episode with Max, and we'll see it again in the next episode with Henry's memories. Thankfully, the end scene where Vecna corners them is really cool. This is my favorite of the scenes where Will uses his hive mind powers, even if him talking through Vecna looks goofy as hell. Rest of the episode is the gang making plans and hanging out, which is all fine, the highlight being another cute Robin and Will scene. They're probably the standout dynamic of this season, even if Noah Schnapp can be pretty stilted a lot of the time.
You're welcome.
Murray also continues to shit out unfunny one-liners.
Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit.
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Number 32. The Nina Project. This episode marks the beginning of Elle's memory plot, meaning we get the return of Matthew Modine as Dr. Brenner, who's on this rewatch ended up being one of my favorite characters of the season. Once you get past the fact that this man survived being full-frontaled by a Demogorgon and walked away with nothing but a cool scar, what they do with his character more than justifies bringing him back, and not only makes him a way more compelling character, but also gives Eleven some great material as well. The idea of these flashbacks being repressed memories is a pretty lame excuse as to why we never heard anything about this stuff before, but it works well enough, and I'm glad they just used grown-up Millie for these scenes, instead of doing that terrible de-aging thing. Well, they do it sometimes, but it's so rare that I can overlook it. A lot of these scenes of her and the other subjects aren't really that engaging, especially on rewatch, as I felt like I already got plenty of this kind of stuff back in the first season. The Hawkins plot is fantastic as always, this time with the crew breaking into the Creel house for some good old-fashioned sleuthing. The house is a super cool location, character dynamics are all really strong, the following the lights thing is a Stranger Things tradition that never gets old, it's all just really solid stuff. Also love the scene before all this where they're hanging out in the Wheeler house and making Ted mad.
I think it's so sweet that you guys are sticking together like this.
Could try sticking together at a different house for a change.
May I?
Absolutely.
Yeah, why not? Take us for all we're worth.
Okay.
And I like that they all sleep in the basement together like a big slumber party, even though Nancy has a bedroom. Joyce and Murray's plot is bad once again, but Hopper is actually surprisingly good this episode, thanks to another great monologue about how fucked up his life is. David Harbour is putting in the work in this scene, and it manages to deepen his past trauma without just hitting the same note again. It's the only time this season that comes close to justifying this Hopper plot existing, but the rest of the show doesn't really do anything with it, so I still maintain he should have just stayed dead. So a fine episode that does have you feeling that mid-season slump, but there's enough good stuff to keep me entertained at least. Number 31. Escape from Camazotz. Another season 5 episode, and like most of them, it has a lot of good and a lot of bad. This one means to finally wrap up Max's torment in Henry's mind, but takes way too bloody long to get there. Her and Holly already spent last episode running around the mind world, found the exit, got cornered by Vecna, escaped, and now we have a whole nother episode of them fucking around until finally leaving at the very end. By this point, the Kate Bush thing is beyond played out, and this is the third time in a row doing the exact same scene where Max runs out of the Vecna lair. What's annoying is there was a chance to switch things up this time, since Max reveals in the next episode that it wasn't the song guiding her out of hell, but her and Lucas's love. It would have been cool if they had to stop the Kate Bush for whatever reason, probably the Demodog's about to maul them, and Max seeing the portal is still there. It would have made for a more powerful scene and given us a break from the usual rigmarole. There's also Max giving Holly a pep talk, which went on for way too long. However, it was a cute scene, so I'm willing to overlook that. As for the hospital sequence, this was one of the bits I was most looking forward to from the trailers, and it's mostly pretty damn cool, very Jurassic Park coded, but of course there's some bullshit ruining it. First off, it was weird that Lucas could just kick this Demodog back while holding Max and not just getting immediately mauled, but that doesn't really matter. What absolutely destroys this scene for me is Mike's mum randomly showing up to explode the demos with a gas bottle. Like, seriously? We already had one badass Karen Wheeler moment in this season. Did we really need another? Literally any other character could have saved the day and it would have been better. Eleven, Will, Hopper, hell, I'll take Mr. Clark or fucking Ted over this shit. Just totally took me out of the episode and made an otherwise tense scene laughable. My favourite stuff in this episode is everything in the Upside Down, where the cold open picks right up from Nancy shooting the exotic matter. This whole sequence is super exciting, and the reveal of a wormhole was awesome, but upon reflection, I'm not sure I love it. One of the initial hooks for this show was the Upside Down, the parallel version of our world that's all fucked up. But then this season tells us that it's actually just a bridge to another place that's supposedly the real lair of evil, except that place looks lame as hell. And the Upside Down isn't even a parallel of our world, it's only Hawkins, and was only recently created when Elle touched the Demogorgon. This revelation raises even more questions though, namely, why the fuck does this wormhole have a carbon copy of Hawkins in it? There's really no explanation for this, and all this new lore about the Upside Down ends up shrinking the scale of the show down, and I would have preferred if they just left it as a mysterious alternate dimension we know nothing about. The Duffers are adamant that this was all the plan from the get-go, but I simply don't buy it because there isn't a whiff of any of this until season 4, and anything before that makes it definitely seem like a parallel universe. I wouldn't be complaining as much if this bridge led to another really cool location, but the Abyss is not that. Nancy and Jonathan find themselves stuck in the cum room, so finally decide to have a good scene together for the first time since like season 2. This conversation feels very appropriate for them, and almost makes up for the love triangle BS that plagued the first half of the season. I honestly didn't expect all 3 of these characters to end up single, but it felt surprisingly right for all of them. My only problem with this scene is that when I first watched it, it didn't read as a breakup at all, and I thought that it was supposed to be more like a reset to put aside their past baggage and keep trucking along as a couple. You could say that's just me being an idiot, but I know for a fact I wasn't the only one who had to find out via a Duffer Brothers interview that this was in fact the end of their relationship. With that knowledge in mind, the scene makes a lot more sense, but I think they should have communicated a bit more clearly what this was actually supposed to be. Also, the goop hardening for no reason is total bullshit. Also, I like Vicky in this episode. I wish he was in the show more. Number 30. Dig Dug. A pretty similar story to the last season 2 episode I talked about, but the character stuff is much stronger, plus the plot is a bit more exciting. The MVP is without a doubt Bob. Sean Astin brings such a great quality to this character with his line readings.
That's the objective. Find the X.
Yeah? What's at the X? Pirate treasure?
I love how he goes from concerned to fully immersed in the cartography game and just keeps going along with it. The logistics of the map in this house thing make no sense whatsoever, but I can suspend the disbelief because it is a pretty fun sequence. In terms of less engaging stuff, Hopper spends the whole episode digging around in the tunnels, trying to accomplish God knows what, instead of immediately getting out of Dodge once he sees what he's dealing with. But the bit when he's rescued and his reaction to Bob makes up for it.
Hey, Bob. Hey, Jim.
This is also a pretty good Lucas episode, with him asking his parents for advice after he pissed off Max. I wish we got to see more of Lucas with his family because I really dig this scene. Max obviously doesn't believe the story of what happened in season 1 and makes some not so subtle winks at the camera about the criticisms.
I just felt it was a little derivative in parts, but
What are you talking about?
I just wish it had a little more originality, that's all.
Meanwhile, Dustin is on his own dealing with Dart, and I find it pretty hard to believe that no one is answering his radio. Lucas is obviously busy with Max, but surely Mike would have answered. But it does lead to this hilarious scene with Ted, so it's all good.
Son of a bitch, you're really no help at all, you know that?
Hey, language.
Plus it marks the beginning of the Steve-Dustin team-up, which is of course legendary. The worst stuff in this episode is Eleven's solo adventure to find her mum, which has about 0 rewatch value. Back in the day when I would watch this show religiously, I would always find myself skipping through this plot because it just isn't really that exciting, and I don't think Elle can carry the story by herself unless she's paired with other really good actors. Number 29. The Crawl. The opening of the final season is mostly pretty good, once you look past the very concept of this episode and season almost completely walking back the cliffhanger of the piggyback. Season 5 picks up 18 months later, all those riffs have been literally covered up, and the kids are going back to school. What the fuck was the point of all of that then? The way season 4 ended, I expected this one to open with a gang all fighting monsters and shit in an apocalyptic Hawkins, but instead we got a reset to a status quo that's barely different from how things were a season ago. The only real change is the town being in quarantine, which doesn't really affect the story or characters at all. I assume the Duffers did this because they couldn't really write a whole season of just shit hitting the fan, and we needed that traditional build-up and mystery. But if you were gonna do that, you may as well have just cut that last scene from the piggyback and left things how they were. What the hell even was the point of Vecna's plan to open the 4 gates and split the world up? Vecna has a whole new plan in this season, and the rifts have nothing to do with it until the very last episode for about 10 minutes.
67.
But enough about that. If you take this episode for what it is, there's a lot to like. The first scene of everyone having breakfast at the Wheelers was awesome. These early scenes are always some of my favorites, and this is no exception. It always feels good to catch up with these characters after not seeing them for 3+ years, and the kids' theme just never gets old. This scene also introduces us to the new Holly, played by Nell Fisher, who, say what you will about the character, but her actress knocked it out of the park. Honestly, my favourite performance of the season, behind Jamie Campbell-Bower. She brings a great energy to Holly, and it helps me look past her age just completely being retconned. Her scene with Mike is one of my favourites of the episode, because Mike is finally back to being the group leader who actually cares about his friends and family. Mike is my favourite character, so suffering through seasons 3 and 4 was pretty rough, but the Duffers remembered what makes him tick for this installment, and it's great to see. That, and he finally got a good haircut. I love seeing him give Holly a pep talk and relate it to D&D, even though it's weird that he completely dismisses the idea of monsters coming after her. Another great scene is Dustin's fight with the jocks, which surprised me with how brutal it was, and most of it's done in one take, which looks really cool. Dustin's depression arc is one that really grew on me over the course of a season. I knew he was going to be moody, but I wasn't prepared for how much drama that would bring out of him and Steve. In terms of stuff I don't like, it's mainly everything involving Elle, Joyce, and Hopper, who are the weak links of this season for sure. Elle's training in the junkyard looks like shit and reminds me way too much of The Rise of Skywalker, and Hopper and Joyce have basically nothing going on other than being overprotective of Elle and Will. Season 4 didn't do much to justify bringing Hopper back from the dead, and this final installment is even worse. The Russia plot was stupid and shouldn't have existed, but it was kind of fun at least. And it's a shame that Eleven gets shafted this season after the last installment being her best ever, but I guess the Duffers wanted to focus on Will more and were incapable of spreading the love around. And speaking of Will, I quite like him in this season, which hasn't been the case since season 2. The Duffers clearly knew they fucked him up in previous installments and made an effort to give him some actual stuff to chew on, and it mostly worked well. Unfortunately, Noah Schnapp's lack of acting ability limits how good his scenes can be.
It's coming. It's coming for them.
The actual worst stuff here, and during the whole season, is of course the military plot, which is so boring I almost forgot to include it. It's always been the weakest link of the show, and it's especially terrible here. It's just wasted screen time that could have gone toward any number of more important things. Number 28. The Bite. Time for a season 3 episode that's actually kinda good. The best plot as usual is the Scoops team, with them putting the Russian base behind them to hang out in the mall. Steve and Robin spend half the episode high on drugs, which is pretty amusing, but once those wear off, they start talking about real shit, which is the best scene of the season bar none. The bait and switch of Robin's true sexuality is amazingly well done. Obviously, the character we're focusing on here is Robin, but Steve also has some really great character growth, admitting he isn't in love with Nancy anymore and his true feelings for Robin. This gets completely thrown out the window next season when he's suddenly down horrendous for Nancy again. Anyway, this scene is fantastic, and when contrasted with Will's coming out, it really is night and day how much more emotional impact this has. The adults plot this episode is also pretty good by season 3 standards. Hopper and Joyce's back and forth is beyond stale at this point, but once they split up, there's a great set piece at the fair with Hopper and the Russian goons. This is probably my favourite action scene of the season, because you really cannot go wrong with a mirror maze and other carnival-related shenanigans. This is also when we get our mandated death scene with new character Alexei, which doesn't hit nearly as hard as Bob's death, but they did a good job building up him and Murray's friendship with the 3 scenes they were given. The stuff I care for the least is the kids and teens facing off against the Mind Flayer, which ends up being another scene of Eleven throwing shit around with her powers. The other characters get to help out a little bit, and the cabin is a cool setting for an action scene, but 7 episodes in, I was starting to get bored of Eleven's shtick. I guess the writers agreed with me because they end up disabling her powers for the finale. The scenes of the party at the grocery store are mostly pretty fun, minus the new Coke scene, which is embarrassingly terrible. That and the excessive amount of screen time dedicated to Back to the Future really hammer home how bad the nostalgia pandering is in this season. What used to be window dressing in the first season is now a core tenet of the show. They straight up use the Back to the Future score during the scene of Dustin and Mike. But overall, I do like this episode. Number 27. The Vanishing of Holly Wheeler. This episode is high as it is for one reason, the first scene. This shit was crazy to watch when it first came out, and it really felt like the Duffers weren't holding back on the violence. Unfortunately, the impact of this scene is deflated by both Karen and Ted surviving with no lasting injuries other than some cool scars, but taking the scene for what it is, it's bloody awesome. The Demogorgon CGI looks great. I love how violently Ted and Karen get slashed. and the performances from Nell and Natalia especially were fantastic. The one issue I have is I think it would have been more powerful if we didn't have these flashback bits showing Karen getting mauled. It was already fine just having Nancy come in and seeing the bloody aftermath. That does unfortunately mark the beginning of the lamest plotline this season. I was pretty disappointed when I found out that once again Elle would be spending a good portion of a season on a side quest. I find her and Hopper's dynamic to be pretty played out at this point, and it's mostly just recycling the same beats of Elle rebelling against him, he gets mad at her, wholesome conversation, and insert as many punks and bitches as possible. It doesn't help that David Harbour and Millie Bobby Brown are both clearly checked out at this point and barely trying, and they're still dragging Hopper's dead daughter. A good portion of this episode is Nancy and Mike trying to figure out who Mr. Watson is, and while it's cool to finally get some brother-sister scenes, and the bit where they dress up is really funny,
What kind of limp is that?
It's a limp. It's a regular limp.
the whole thing kind of falls flat because of how obvious who Mr. Watson is. Holly told you some random guy said there were monsters in Hawkins, and she was seen talking to nobody, and now she's kidnapped by a Demogorgon? I wonder who Mr. Watson could be. The scene where Karen dramatically writes his name out is just so silly as a result, so if Vecna used any name other than Henry, these goobers wouldn't even have realized who he is. I do love Mr. Watson though. I'm glad they found an excuse to keep using Jamie's human form, because he honestly has way more aura than when he's wearing the Vecna getup. Also, Mike doesn't really seem that fazed by his parents being mutilated, but Natalia's performance was great, especially when she's trying to clean the blood off her horrendous all-pink outfit, and this scene where she calls out Mike and herself for not doing anything.
We could have done something. Anything.
Steve and Jonathan and later Dustin spend the whole episode arguing with each other. The military continues to be tools. Like, seriously, why don't these guys think to look at this group of people who've been involved with this upside down shit for like 4 years now? You're literally standing in their house. Number 26. The Sauna Test. Time for an episode that I thought was peak back when it came out, and is still pretty good now. This one sees the party unite to face off against Billy, and even if their characters aren't nearly as deep as previous seasons, I still love seeing them working together. This episode outlines what the threat will be for the rest of the season, which is the Mind Flayer up to no good again with a new host. It's very much a repeat of season 2, minus the personal conflict of one of the good guys being possessed. This time it's Billy, who was already an evil character with nothing going on, and the potential drama of him being Max's sister is never really addressed outside a couple fleeting moments. As for the sauna test itself, it's a very well put together scene and the music is especially good, but there isn't really any tension because we already know Billy is the host, and none of these child characters are obviously going to be killed by him only 4 episodes in. As for the Scoops troop, this is when their team is fully assembled with Erica joining the fold, which is great news if you don't find her character annoying. I can tolerate her, but I'm glad they reduced her role in the following seasons. My favourite scene is when the trio are planning how they're going to get him a room, and Steve is trying to convince him he can beat up the guard with a massive gun. These characters are way too chill about making a 10-year-old sneak into a room guarded by a guy with a massive gun though. Also, who the hell is running the scoop shop while these guys dick around on their secret mission? Nancy and Jonathan get themselves fired for their shenanigans, and this scene with them arguing in the car is really good. Jonathan's mad she doesn't have to worry about money or anything like that because she's well off, and she's mad at the sexism she's been dealing with. These are both valid points and a good setup for some drama, but after this scene, the classism debate is never brought up again. Jonathan apologizes for doubting her, she doesn't say sorry for anything, and then they do nothing for the rest of the season. As for the adults plot, it isn't nearly as good as the previous episode, but there's still plenty to like. Hopper interrogating the evil mayor is a whole lot of fun, one of a few times where his cartoonish craziness works in the show's favor. There isn't much going on beyond that, and Joyce is nothing more than a sidekick at this point. Number 25. Here comes a certified classic, the Halloween episode. If we're judging these episodes based purely on vibes, then this one wins without question. Whoever decided to set this season during Halloween was cooking, because the aesthetic of the season, and this episode especially, is just untouchable. The montage of the kids getting their photos taken is hilarious, love how moody Mike is, and then the scene where they argue about who's Venkman is also great. Plus that moment where Dustin realizes that they're the only ones wearing costumes, which is shot like a horror movie. We also get to see the boys attempting to court Max, which is also amusing. I like the friction it causes with Mike, who I think is a really compelling character this season. A lot of people don't like how moody he is, but I think it's very much in character for him considering he was the de facto leader in season 1, and now is feeling a bit directionless without the goal of saving Will, plus Elle being dead. So when Will starts having episodes during Trick or Treat, it makes sense that he'd immediately leap into action to help and to give himself some purpose again. Another great set piece is the Halloween party all the teens attend, where Nancy and Steve have their big fight while she's drunk. Great acting from Natalia Dyer here. This episode is also our reintroduction to Eleven, now living with Hopper. I already talked about how good their dynamic is, but this episode's weighed down by the flashbacks catching us up on how she got into this situation. The way she gets out of the Upside Down is pretty lame, but we needed Eleven back in the picture, and the how isn't really important. I honestly would have been fine with them not showing how she survived and just letting us fill in the blanks. Whenever it's Hopper and Elle together though, it's fantastic. I love seeing him teach her words and stuff. But yeah, everything about this episode just clicks, even if there's not much going on plot-wise. It's just nice to be in this world with these characters, which is why I always dig the early episodes of each season before they get swept up in the narrative. Number 24. The Right Side Up. So at the time of me writing this segment, I just watched the final episode last night. I had a bunch of friends over, we made bingo cards, drank beers, ate pizza, and yelled at the screen. Not to mention, I had $50 on the line, betting with a friend that no characters would die. It was a total blast, but as for the episode itself, I really had no idea what to think. It's hard to place this one within the ranking since it's so recent, but here's my take anyways. If it wasn't obvious by now, Season 5 hasn't exactly been the slam dunk we were hoping for, but even before the season started, I was saying as long as the finale was good, I could overlook however mid the rest of it was. And now I feel a bit stuck because I didn't think the finale was bad, but it wasn't outstanding by any means. There's things that I really love, mainly the very last scene, but so many details just feel wrong. Having the final battle take place in the Abyss dampened any impact it could have had because this location is incredibly lame. It's a big yellow desert, and looks like shit every time the characters are standing around against a green screen. Inside Vecna's lair looks cool because that's an actual set, but whenever we're outside it just looks terrible. I don't even think bad CGI is to blame, well it is, but the concept of this location is just so boring that not even a $400 million budget could save it. As for the battle itself, it's basically a repeat of Starcourt, with the gang all throwing shit at the Mind Flayer, but with the added bonus of Elle and Will murking Vecna inside it. I've seen people complaining that this fight was over way too quickly, but I actually like that because frankly the giant CGI battles are my least favourite part of this show, and I'd rather get through it quick as possible so we can get to the more emotional stuff. The best part is once Vecna's been impaled and Joyce shows up to finish the job. I've complained about how she's been a totally pointless character for like 3 seasons now, but having her be the one to put Henry down felt so right. It's debatable who suffered the most at the hands of this gremlin, but Joyce was who we experienced most of the drama through back in the beginning. This is also one of the only times where the flashback cutaways actually felt appropriate, showing how all of our characters have been affected by Henry's bullshit. Joyce's one-liner was so corny that it wrapped right around to being awesome. Sorry, not sorry.
You're fucked with the wrong family.
On the subject of Vecna, we were all a bit worried that the Duffers were going to go for a last-minute redemption, like, oh, the Mind Flayer was actually controlling him the whole time and he's actually a victim. And it seemed like they were going that way, with Will saying he was just a kid like him, but it turns out Henry likes being evil, so Will immediately snaps his arm off. I quite like what they ended up going with, and Jamie Campbell Bower's performance not just in this scene but the whole season was spectacular. He's the only one who seemed to be putting in any effort this season. But what the hell was this random stone that has the Mind Flayer inside it? The lore with Henry and the Mind Flayer seemed pretty clear cut to me back in season 4, but this season muddled it to try to do both of them as the endgame. Eleven's fate is the big talking point of the finale, and I'm not happy with either outcome. I was betting it all on no characters dying, and I was 100% positive that we would have an Elle fake-out death and her return in the very last scene. And we got that, sort of. Elle's fate is ultimately ambiguous, with us having to choose to either believe Mike's cope that she went off to live in Israel, or accept that she exploded with the rest of the Upside Down. The problem is that no matter which way you slice it, this is a pretty depressing end for Eleven. She suffered through traumatic events her entire life, had no real childhood, was ripped away from her loved ones on numerous occasions, and she either ended up dead or having to go into hiding for the rest of her life. After all that shit she went through, Eleven deserves to be happy with her friends, not living in some random village by herself, or just dead. Not to mention Mike having to lose her yet again. Crazy how both the Bylers and Malevins lost in the end. As for the death scene itself, it's mostly good, except Finn Wolfhard's acting is genuinely laughable.
Please don't do this. Please don't do this.
As for whether I think Elle survived, I initially thought she did, but the explanation for her escape is seriously contrived, so that's why my bet of no one dying ended up in a draw.
I believe. I believe.
I believe. I believe.
I think she's dead. I don't know.
The rest of the characters really have nothing going on in this finale. Hopper has some genuinely good scenes with Elle, rendered pointless by him not giving a fuck that she's dead in the epilogue. Steve has an embarrassingly awful fake-out death complete with a cut to black, easily the worst part of the episode. I liked this Mike and Will scene because Mike finally addressed how dumb he was in the past, but the last line is terrible.
Friends? No thanks. Best friends.
All that's left is the epilogue, which is what I was really looking forward to. Everything involving the kids growing up was really cute, love all of that. The teen characters hanging out on the roof was bad, and Hopper being chief of police again is highly questionable. Why didn't his cop friends make a single appearance this season, and how the hell did they explain him being back from the dead after exploding in that mall fire like 3 years ago? The fact that there was never a single scene of anyone other than Eleven reacting to him being back really pisses me off. His scene with Mike where he talks about the Bad Choice Road is really good though. I think we all knew this would end with the kids playing D&D again, but there's nothing wrong with something being expected when it's the right choice for the story. Max being part of a group and still being referred to as the Zoomer was cool, and Mike narrating everyone's futures was really sweet. The fact that he sent Will off to Tel Aviv was a bit questionable, but the rest is very cute. Apparently this was the last scene filmed for the show, and you can tell when everyone's putting their books back on the shelf barely holding back tears. At the end of the day, this was a show about kids growing up, and the benefit of taking a decade to make it means we got to see every stage of that. I'm about the same age as these guys, so it really feels like I grew up along with them. Each season came out when I was in a different stage of my life, whether it was high school, college, and now watching this final episode after just graduating from university. The cherry on top is Mike watching the next generation of kids continuing the D&D tradition. This scene really hit the spot and capped off what may be a messy finale, but a fitting ending regardless. Also loved the end credits with David Bowie's Heroes and the D&D illustrations. Also, where the fuck was Susie? Number 23. The Piggyback. Okay, this one is a doozy. This is maybe the most insane episode of TV I've ever seen, thanks mostly to its utterly ridiculous runtime. 2 hours and 20 minutes is long by movie standards, let alone TV. Not even the final episode of the series can compare. It's frankly insane that the Duffers got away with this, but you also gotta commend them at the same time. What's truly incredible is that the episode still manages to feel rushed, but we'll get to that. If you're someone who loves the constantly ramping scale and production values of the show, then this is probably your favorite episode because the spectacle really is blockbuster level. After watching this, I wondered how they could possibly top it for the final season, and the answer is they didn't. It honestly feels way more like a series finale than The Right Side Up ever does. Plus, the final battle doesn't look like shit, which helps. Let's start with the meat of the finale, which is the plan to break into Vecna's lair and slay him dead, led by Nancy, Steve, and Robin. The concept of these characters sneaking into the villain's bedroom to kill him is one that I love. Also love how scrappy the team's plan is. There's no relying on Eleven's powers or anything like that. It's just to set Vecna on fire and pump him full of lead. While those guys are in Vecna's house, Dustin and Eddie have to distract the bats with a guitar solo, which is an example of the Duffers just doing something cool for the hell of it with no real justification. The Master of Puppets scene is obviously awesome, and is Eddie's defining moment of the season before he dies an unceremonious death. I can't overstate enough just how pointless this is, and how stupid this whole arc of Eddie's is throughout the season. He makes sure to remind the audience every episode that he's always running away from his problems. So to conclude this arc by having him face his fears and become a hero seems pretty logical, but the way they do it is beyond dumb. The problem here is that Eddie's death wasn't heroic and he didn't even save anyone. Dustin was already in the clear, in fact he was put in more danger by having to jump back through the gate and smash his leg. And the bats immediately died after murking Eddie, so there was no point in facing off against them either. I don't have a problem with Eddie dying, but you gotta make it actually have a point. Otherwise it just comes across as manipulating the audience. Max in this episode is complicated. She's using herself as bait so that Vecna can be vulnerable in his attic, and ends up getting caught by him and sadly dies in Lucas's arms. It's a heart-wrenching scene thanks to the incredible performances by Sadie and Caleb, and when I first watched it, I was shocked that the Duffers went for it and killed one of their main characters in such a tragic fashion, one of the kids no less. Huge props to them for that, even if it's pretty depressing to have Max's story end like that. And then Eleven decides to bring her back to life immediately after.
You're not going.
Those fucking Duffers got me again. I swore I wouldn't let myself be fooled after the Hopper bullshit, but here we are with basically the exact same scenario a season later. If you don't want your characters to die, that's fine, just stop making us think they're dead only to pull the rug out immediately afterwards. And now we're left to the exact same situation as Hopper's death, where the dead character is going to spend the majority of the next season dicking around in their own side plot just to end up back where they were. Max doesn't even suffer any lasting injuries from her death, when we saw both her arms and legs break and she lost her eyesight. She wakes up, and after sitting in a wheelchair for a couple episodes, she's completely back to normal, skateboard and all. At least Hopper had to go through the fucking gulag and fight demogorgons to get back home. Max just runs around in Fantasyland with Holly. To end this rant, I just want to say I don't think the solution is to kill Max, because I do like her and I want to see her happy ending with Lucas. But you gotta pick one or the other, you can't keep doing both. Anyway, I may as well talk about Hopper since I mentioned him a couple times already. Him and the rest of the Russian crew are the weak link of the episode as usual, but at least there's some pretty cool action this time around. There's zero character stuff going on here, it's all hype moments and aura, but when Hopper picks up a fantasy sword to 1v1 a Demogorgon with a comically epic remix of Kate Bush blaring in the background, I couldn't help but let the aura wash over me and enjoy it for what it is. The rest of this Russian plot is whatever, but I do find it hilarious that we spent several episodes with Hopper breaking out of a prison, then he's immediately caught and returned there, then he breaks out again with Joyce and co, then immediately returns again to destroy the Mind Flayer particles. Did these dumbasses really not think it was worth dealing with those particles while they were already there? As for the California gang, they don't manage to get to Hawkins for the final battle, and instead have to Skype in through Argyle's pizza freezer. Unlike Russia, there's some pretty nice character moments before shit hits the fan, mainly Will's heart-to-heart with Jonathan, which is a great scene and way better than his actual coming out. The issue is this is Jonathan's only good scene in the season, and he barely even talks to Will in season 5. Once the fighting starts, the Cali crew has nothing to do other than watch Elle, which is an appropriate conclusion to a whole season of them being sidelined. Mike at least gets his big speech about love, which again is good, but his only great moment of the season. Elle versus Wagner is back to the usual pointing the hand at each other until someone wins, but thankfully there's all the other stuff going on to keep it interesting. Lucas's 1v1 with Jason is one of the best scenes of the season. It genuinely feels tense and had a real feeling of desperation, and the way Jason dies is the loudest I've ever laughed at a TV show. The epilogue feels way too rushed, with us speeding through all the resolutions until the end. I honestly think we could have had this episode end at Max's resurrection, and then make the epilogue its own episode, to make this one less overwhelming, and then give more time for the wrap-up. My problem here is that many big moments like Elle and Hopper reuniting aren't given the time and weight they deserve, and lots of details are just skipped over. We don't get to see anyone else's reaction to Hopper being back, outside of a quick scene with Mike where he doesn't seem to give a fuck.
Hey.
You're grown.
Yeah.
Jonathan and Nancy finally have the chance to talk, but they decide to just push it off until the next season. Argyle is still here for some reason, and promptly disappears and is never mentioned again in season 5. No mention of Dmitri and Yuri, I guess they just went back to their home planet. There's also no mention of Russia ever again, which makes the fact we spent 2 seasons on that bullshit especially stupid. We never get to hear a normal person's thoughts on the town being split apart, just brushing it off as an earthquake. This one especially annoys me because did you fucking see that shit? How the hell did that get called an earthquake? And there's no real mention of it in season 5 either. Why did you bother to have this plotline where the townsfolk take a stand against the Hellfire Club and all that, if you're not going to show their reactions to any of this? Sorry, but there's so many details like that dragging this episode down that no amount of hype and aura can cover. Number 22. The Hellfire Club. The opener of season 4 kicks off on a high note and does a great job showing us who the key players are for this installment. There are a lot of characters in this season, too many to count, and as such, the longer season 4 runtime feels justifiable since we need to be caught up on all of them. I'm going to start with a minor issue I have that applies to the whole season, and that's the time jump from the previous installment. Season 4 picks up in March of 1986, a mere 8 months after the majority of season 3, and only 5 months after the buyers moved away. In reality, it's been 3 years, and the actors all look way older, most noticeably Will, Mike, and Lucas. I understand this season took way longer to make thanks to Corona, but even discounting that, season 3 took almost 2 full years to release after season 2. I think the Duffers should have taken this into consideration and set this season at least in 87 or even 88, so then at least there's a couple years for the characters to grow up. It also means there's more time for them to grow apart, which they have at the start of the season anyway. It also means we don't have to waste time with this Jonathan and Nancy college application subplot, but enough about that. It's not a real issue because I and most others can look past the actors' ages, but it just seems like something that could have easily been solved. As for the actual episode, we immediately establish Eleven and co living in California, which is a nice change of scenery, and I of course love seeing Elle at high school getting bullied. I wish we had a bit more time to soak in this new status quo before shipping Elle off to Nevada, but what we do get is really good. I don't know about y'all, but I love the scene where she tries to use her powers on Angela. It's cringe humor at its finest. The rest of the crew back at Hawkins are all going through it, mainly Max, who's taking center stage as the main character for this season. She's a way more interesting character this time around, and it also retroactively improves Billy by heaping all his baggage onto Max. Her scene with Lucas is a highlight of the episode, and it's great to see him being an actual character again. This is easily his best season, not just his stuff with Max, but his conflict with Jason and the other jocks as well. Mike and Dustin don't really have much going on, which is a shame, but there's so many balls to juggle that it was inevitable some were going to get dropped. Speaking of balls, this season introduces a lot of new players. In this one episode, we meet Jason, Chrissy, Eddie, Fred, Argyle, Angela, Vicky, and Vecna. Obviously, not all of these people are going to be key players, but that's still a lot to digest. The episode manages to get us through all these introductions very efficiently, by giving us 1 or 2 solid scenes for each of the important ones to get to know them. The highlight here is Chrissy, who we only get to be with for one episode, but the writers managed to make us connect with her through both the Vecna scares and her scenes with Eddie. Speaking of him, when he first showed up, I thought he made a terrible first impression. This scene of him traipsing around parading how random and quirky he is really put me off, but thankfully he improves to become one of the best characters by the end of the season. Argyle doesn't really offer much beyond giving Jonathan someone to talk to, and Jason gets this big macho speech about how all the people in Hawkins died so we could win this basketball game. As for Joyce, she's got this new telemarketer job which somehow pays for this big house in California. I'll give this episode points for not having any Hopper plot to drag it down, but the writers didn't even attempt to give Joyce some character moments with any of her children before demoting her to Murray's sidekick. And the moment she finds out Hopper is alive isn't given nearly the amount of weight that it should, but minus that, this is a really strong opening to the season. Also, the needle drops this episode are on point.
Hey folks, my name is Quinn the GM. After watching Stranger Things Season 5, which I have mostly negative opinions on, I went back to rewatch the first episode of the previous season, the Hellfire Club, and I found it to be a tremendous breath of fresh air. All of these characters feel like characters. They are high school kids. They're doing high school things. And while there are supernatural elements, it is still more balanced between the realistic and the supernatural sides of the story, and I feel like the writing is at its best when these elements are balanced. I think the Hellfire Club is a really deft repilot for the series. All of these characters are kind of back to being themselves after, getting away a little bit during Season 3 when everybody was a little bit of a cartoon character. And I think this does do a great job reorienting the show around several elements that were its core in the early seasons. I am a huge D&D nerd. My name is Quinn the GM because my channel started out talking about Dungeons & Dragons, and I think that the presence of D&D in this episode does very much kind of make me grow a soft spot for it in general. And I also think that Vecna is a really effective presence throughout this episode, as I do think in this season he is the most effective villain the show has. I also really enjoy the fact that Vecna is actually kind of appropriately named and name-dropped in terms of relation to actual D&D things. Vecna is a big bad in D&D. He's an archlich, this undead creature with these psychic magical powers, and it does very much fit who he is, whereas Demogorgon doesn't really fit. That's kind of a prince of the abyss, and while they do call the other dimension the abyss in the 5th season, it's still not really the same, especially given the fact that Demogorgons are these kind of lower level minions, at least after Season 1, where, they were such a big threat back then, which is another issue I have with the show. But regardless of that, I do really like a lot of what is established here in this first episode. I think there are some flaws. I am not sold on the Joyce and Murray plot, as is pretty much the case for the entirety of that plot this season. But overall, very good episode, one of my favorites.
Number 21.
Sorcerer.
The highest rated episode of Season 5 is pretty good, but has some big shit weighing it down. The highlight is the entire scheme to get the kids out of a military base. Although it's funny that we just had a wacky plan involving child kidnapping last episode, and now we're doing it again. Derek gets to take the spotlight for this one, and boy do I love him. I don't know how the Duffers managed to keep introducing lovable side characters, but Derek might be my favorite of them all. I wish he was in the show a bit more, but better to be left wanting more than oversaturating him. The rest of his plot is really fun as well, with the funniest scene of all time.
Mr. Watson?
And the chaotic showdown with the Demogorgons. It's funny how these things can mow through these dudes but can't even manage to kill Ted Wheeler, but the sequence is incredibly executed, very impressive stunt work, great VFX on the demos. It lost a bit of weight from being all over the trailers though. Will has some pretty major developments this episode, with Robin giving him advice on how he should stop pining after Mike and focus on himself. Really nice scene with a good Maya Hawke performance, and it ends up being what allows Will to unlock his powers, which I guess he always had. What I don't like is that he has the nosebleed like Eleven. His powers aren't supposed to be like hers, they're Hive Mind exclusive, so why do they have to give him that other than the dummies to point and clap at the screen? Also, I just can't take Noah Schnapp's stupid face seriously, and I'm sorry. Speaking of things I hate, the Upside Down plot reaches next level dogshit. Hopper and Elle have to break into the military base because they think Vecna's in there, which is an insanely stupid concept because we've been watching the show and we know he's busy grooming children in his Epstein house. Then the Duffers decide to do another fucking fake out Hopper death, and I was just sitting there like this the whole time. Who the hell do these guys think they're fooling, pulling this shit yet again? They have this whole slow-mo scene of him epically going in that room, complete with more dead daughter shit and a cut to black, and it's like, yeah, we know he's not gonna fucking die, so stop doing this dumb bullshit. Hopper's epic plan is to just explode himself and take Vecna down with him, and after one quick argument in the next episode, it's never mentioned again. Joyce never even finds out about it, which would have been a way to squeeze some drama out of that tired dynamic. And the conclusion to this plot is the reveal of Carly being back, which I hate. The Duffers were fucked no matter what they did with this character. You either ignore her and let the Lost Sister be a one-off misfire, which makes that episode worse by never amounting to anything, or you try to bring her back and improve her, which is just going to make this season worse because the character sucked and the actress was terrible and we already have enough people in the cast as is.
6, 7.
A big portion of the runtime is taken up by catching us up on what Max has been up to, which is all a snooze. On first watch it was intriguing because I didn't know what they were gonna do with it, but it's just Max walking through memories and explaining what's happening, which kills the pacing and has no rewatchability. Not to mention the scene everyone was mocking where Max decides to take 7 business days to jog to the exit. Not much else to say other than that I love the Beamer gang driving through the Bopper Gate and just everything with those 4 characters. Shame they're barely in the episode, but this shit is already way too long as is. Number 20. The Weirdo on Maple Street. Finally, it's time to talk about Season 1, over halfway through the list. It goes without saying that this is the best season of Stranger Things, and after watching Season 4 and 5, going back to this original installment feels so quaint. There's basically no bullshit here, so all the episodes are consistently great. This one ends up being the least good thanks to it coming off the intro episode and still being in the setup phase of the story. Much of it is dedicated to introducing Eleven to the boys group, and their different reactions to her. I like these cute moments of Mike showing Elle all the stuff in his house, and Lucas's distrust of her. I've seen people hating on him for how he treats Elle throughout the season, but I think it's entirely fair that he be more focused on finding Will, and she does try to jeopardize that mission at least once. Hopper's investigation is all good stuff, particularly the scene of him finding Benny's corpse. There's so many little details about Hopper in the first season that all add up to him being the best character. His line about Benny being his friend, pondering if he's cursed, his foreshadowing of a quarry being deadly, David Harbour is putting in the work 110%. Also love his camaraderie with the other coppers, who I wish were in the show more. Jonathan's on a side quest to see if Will's with Lonnie, who's another character I often forget exists until I rewatch. Jonathan spends the rest of the episode taking creepy pictures of Nancy, which is something the show really brushes over after he gets his comeuppance for it. Like, it's never mentioned again after Nancy calls him out for it in episode 5. Steve's party is a fun scene as well, but I find it funny that this guy is supposedly the top dog of Hawkins High, and the best party he can throw is with a total of 4 people. Number 19. The Battle of Starcourt. Time for another finale, and it was pretty tough to decide how to order this and the season 4 and 5 ones. They all have their qualities and detriments, and this one is especially interesting. Most of it is really damn good, with a bit of bullshit and one fatal flaw that I cannot look past. You can probably guess what that is, but we'll get to it in a sec. I've got to immediately give points for not being a 2-hour slog like the other ones. This episode is longer than usual, but is paced very well and justifies the runtime plenty. The goal here is to close the gate and kill the Mind Flayer. This is a bit of a red flag because it's an identical setup to Season 2's finale, but it's not too big of an issue because the method to closing the gate is totally different, not to mention the added wrinkles of Billy and the Meat Flayer running around. There's some serious heavy lifting to put Hopper's character back on track after he was a joke all season. His last scene with Eleven is really nice. I also like his acknowledgement of Mike, and this scene with Joyce is great as well. His final face-off with Arnold is fine. It'd hit harder if they hadn't already fought several times before, but it looks good at least. The entire episode is a feast for the eyes. Maybe the most visually captivating episode of the entire series. Hopper's death is also a very fitting conclusion to his character, but if they were gonna do his death for real, I'd prefer something a bit more personal than blowing up a Russian laser beam. As for upstairs, a lot of the episode is spent hiding from the Mind Flayer and the mole, while Billy sits outside doing nothing. Most of these scenes aren't very tense, and there aren't any personal stakes because it's just a big monster wreaking havoc. The good stuff starts once they leave the mall and come back, because that's when Billy gets in on the action after getting fucked up by Steve's car. I wish Steve had a more personal confrontation with Billy after he got demolished by him last season, but the two don't even share one scene. The way Billy goes out is also something I'm not satisfied with. Elle manages to turn him back to the light by reminding him how hot his mum was, which feels cheap and lazy. If you're gonna do the redemption thing, I would prefer if it was Max instead of Elle, because even though they don't like each other, at least they actually had an on-screen dynamic. Unlike Elle, who he never even interacted with until he was already flayed. The idea of a redemption for Billy is just stupid because that man has zero redeeming qualities. This little moment where he says sorry to Max is good at least. Speaking of weird stuff, should probably touch on the never-ending story thing, which is so unbelievably stupid that it almost wraps around to being genius. Almost. I seriously have no idea what the Duffers were thinking, but it at least introduced us to Susie, who was a cool character in season 4, and then entirely forgotten about in the final. Also got to shout out this sequence of a Mind Flayer being pelted with fireworks, for basically being a better version of a battle in season 5. It's set in an actual physical location, looks great, and did I mention it's not set in a CGI desert? The best stuff is the epilogue, 3 months after all the carnage. This whole segment honestly feels like it could be an ending for the entire series with how emotional it is. We see this house that went through so much shit over the years now empty, everyone hugs and cries, it's all quite beautiful stuff. The fact that it only takes 1 season for the gang to all be reunited back in Hawkins does undercut the emotions of them splitting up though. The best bit is Hopper's letter, which is an incredible scene filled with emotions about growing up, changing, and how Hopper's life was saved by Eleven. The music is amazing, combined with the B-roll of a destroyed cabin and the kids saying their goodbyes, and they top it off by once again playing that cover of Heroes from Season 1. It even managed to tug at my rusty heartstrings, and is the perfect send-off to one of the best characters of the show. And then we find out in a post-credit scene that Hopper's actually alive in Russia. I know I've complained about this ad nauseum, but allow me to grind that dead horse to dust. I cannot believe these duffer fuckers spent 20 minutes mourning Hopper's death and wringing every last ounce of emotion out of the audience before immediately switching up and saying he's alive. Yeah, they don't explicitly say he's the American, but we all knew who it was, and they wasted no time officially confirming it in the first teaser for Season 4. They genuinely had an amazing ending to a beloved character on their hands, and they just had to go and ruin it because they're too chicken to commit to killing any of their characters, even if it's the right time for it. I could maybe look past it if Hopper actually had some purpose in the story once he returned, but he does nothing for 2 seasons other than drag down Season 4 with his god-awful Russia plot and then complain about how Eleven is a punk ass in Season 5. Worse still, they tried to pull this bullshit again with that suicide bomb plan of his. What was the point of any of this? Did the Duffers plan from the start to do this fake out malarkey, or did they write it as a real death and then backtrack at the last second? I know this ain't that serious and it's just a TV show, but they actually managed to make me feel emotions with this shit, so yeah, I felt betrayed when it was immediately reversed. So I'm sorry, the rest of the episode may be great, but this one blemish means I can't put it any higher than where it currently is. Number 18.
Mad Max.
Most of the reasons I like this episode also apply to the Halloween one, so I'll try to avoid repeating what I said there. The opener of Season 2 sets the vibe perfectly, and gives us just enough of all our favourite characters while sprinkling in the new faces. Feels great to see all the boys back together now with Will in the mix, and them at the arcade is super fun stuff. Also love how awestruck they are by Mad Max, and when she trolls them with the paper in the bin. Her and Billy are the big new players this season, with Max being a great addition of a party that brings out some fun drama, while Billy isn't much more than a replacement Steve now that he's stepped out of a jock bully role. Billy is fine in that archetype, but I don't think he adds enough to the season or show to justify his existence. He really has nothing going on until one scene way later where we see his dad is a meanie. Dacre Montgomery does great work with the material he was given though. We're also introduced to Murray, but it's not much more than one scene establishing him as a nutjob before he disappears for half a season. More importantly, Hopper, Joyce and Will go to meet the replacement Brenner, the lovable Paul Reiser. Dr. Owens is a very inconsistent character throughout the series, but I quite like him here in Season 2. He rides the line of whether he's trustworthy or not really well, and you're always questioning if this guy's up to some bullshit or a genuine good guy. I would have liked if Will's trauma was expressed as actual PTSD at some point, like Owens theorizes, but it's only ever Mind Flayer shenanigans. That applies across the board. Anytime any of these characters express trauma from all the shit that's happened to them, it's only ever through upside down stuff manipulating them. Max is the closest we get, but that quickly turns into Vecna chicanery. As for the teens, Steve and Nancy have to deal with Barb's Delulu parents, which sets up Nancy's season-long Justice for Barb crusade. I know I complained about this plot before, but it is a pretty logical progression for Nancy's character after Barb was done dirty in the first season. Jonathan has some really good stuff too, mainly the scene with Will where he projects how unique and cool he is, and just gets roasted in response.
Is that why you don't have any friends?
I have friends, Will.
Also like seeing Nancy and Jonathan being friends, but we're deprived of any John-Steve interactions even though they're right next to each other for a second. The fact that after season 1 these guys basically don't interact until season 5 is a travesty. A really good starting point for the season, and the needle drops are on fire with so many bangers. Number 17. The Monster and the Superhero. On this rewatch, I was surprised by just how much I loved this episode. The character stuff is really strong and the plot developments are intriguing. We get the beginnings of the Nancy-Robin duo, which is great of course, even if Robin isn't quite as fun a character as in season 3. With each season, they kept dialing up her zaniness, but it works in this episode because she's supposed to be getting on Nancy's nerves. And I do love a good library research scene. Dustin seems as surprised as we are that they're leaning back into the Steve and Nancy sexual tension, which I can only assume the Duffers did because otherwise Steve would have nothing going on. The end of the episode has the awesome twist of Max being Vecna's next target, and I love how this is revealed with actually appropriate flashbacks showing all her symptoms. This is gonna sound crazy, but my favorite plot this episode is actually California. This is the last one with all of them together, and there's some really great character drama. This argument scene with Mike and Elle is genuinely my favorite scene of the two in the whole show. Finn and especially Millie are fantastic, and the dialogue is very true to the characters.
From Mike. From Mike. From Mike. From Mike. Okay.
I think making Mike's entire arc this season just being that he can't say the L word is pretty lame, but this scene is still superb. This is Doc Owen's return to the show after sitting out season 3 minus mugging the camera for 1 second. His role is purely plot reasons, since we need to get Elle out to Nevada so she can relive some trauma. I like this hype and aura scene where he talks about the war coming to Hawkins, but I think his role in season 2 was much better. This episode also has the funniest scene of the show, the family dinner with Murray's risotto. I know we all hate Brett Gelman, but he's hilarious here, and I love his befuddlement at Argyle.
Can you pass me the olive oil? That's wine.
This girl got smacked in the head today at the roller rink.
Smacked.
Yeah, it was one of those vicious skate attacks.
Skate attack?
This risotto? He's smacking, dude.
Still have no idea who he is.
The only thing dragging the episode is, you guessed it, the Russia plot. Nothing going on here other than Hopper getting a guy to beat him up. I've complained about this plot plenty, so let's move on. Number 16. After a little mid-season slump, this episode kicks season 2 back into gear. The best stuff is Steve and Dustin's newfound bromance, which we all love and I have nothing to say about. Steve's advice to Dustin about girls is low-key terrible though. It's a fruitless endeavor anyway because Lucas and Max are busy having cute moments together. This scene with them on top of a bus is lovely, and it helps that these are the two best child actors on the show. The whole sequence of the junkyard is some quality shit. Always gotta love Steve beating shit up with the nail bat. Dustin hyping him up is funny as well.
He's insane.
He's awesome.
Will's plot picks up some serious momentum, with him and the others stuck at the lab trying to figure out how to deal with his situation. I've given Noah Schnapp a lot of shit, but he does a fantastic job playing Will possessed by the Mind Flayer. The montage of the soldiers heading to the trap combined with the junkyard squad preparing for Dart is magnificent thanks to a great bit of score by Dixon and Stein.
Hey, dickheads. How come the only one helping me out is this random girl? We lose light in 40 minutes, let's go.
The switch up leads to a pretty great cliffhanger, which is ruined by the fact that the next episode is the lost sister. Jonathan and Nancy's plot concludes here, with Murray egging them on to fuck even though he's like 40 and they're 17. It's good to see Nancy and Jonathan finally get together, but now that they're an item, they don't get much of substance to do for the remainder of the show. Nancy gets to always be the one shooting shit with guns, which gives the illusion of her being important to the story, but Jonathan just drops off the face of the earth, which is a shame because he was one of the main characters of the first season. The writers clearly had no idea what to do with either of them that wasn't relationship drama, hence why they ended up leaning back into the Steve and Nancy thing in season 4. This is the last time both these characters are fully interesting if you ask me. 11 is also entirely absent for this episode, which actually enhances it because we get to spend more time on the good stuff. Number 15. The Flea and the Acrobat. Back to season 1 for some more consistent quality. At this point, all 3 age groups are fully immersed in the conspiracies and mysteries, with this episode giving plenty of titillating plot developments. For one thing, the kids get some advice from Mr. Clark on how to travel to another dimension, which is a great scene minus the folding the paper in half thing that every single movie does when explaining wormholes. Also love how chill the kids are at the funeral knowing that Will is actually alive. The montage of everyone gearing up for that funeral is straight fire as well. The drama heats up once they start trying to get to the gate with their compasses, and Lucas's suspicions of Elle trying to jeopardize them are finally confirmed. I love this scene because all the characters are fully justified in their behaviors, so you can't really be mad at Lucas for stirring the pot or Mike getting defensive. These characters are kids at the end of the day, and kids act rash and do dumb things. Nancy and Jonathan decide to team up to murder the Demogorgon, and while they're traipsing around the woods, they have a great argument scene where she rightfully gets pissy at him for taking naked photos of her, and he clocks how much of a loser she is. And there's another great cliffhanger of Nancy being trapped in the Upside Down, one of a few genuinely scary scenes in the show. Lonnie and Joyce's drama comes to an abrupt end in this episode when she realizes he's just there to profit off Will's demise, and then he's never heard from again. This is a fine end for his character, but I think overall he's the weakest link out of the cast in this first season. He served the plot fine, but he never really contributed anything beyond being a dick. He should have returned in season 5 to get mauled by a Demogorgon or something. The best stuff in this episode is Hopper, who's really going through it. After he wakes up back in his trailer, there's a great montage of him destroying the place to find a bug, much like Mike in his car in Better Call Saul, but I always found it funny that the last place he looks is the most obvious spot. This guy was tearing apart couches and shit, but didn't think to check the light first. This brief scene of him calling up his ex is fantastic. David Harper is so damn good in this first season. Him telling Joyce she was right about everything is an ultra satisfying moment as well. Just a really great episode full of memorable moments. Number 14. The Turnbow Trap. This is my pick for best season 5 episode, because it feels most true to the roots of the show. It's centered around the gang devising a plan to save Derek from Vecna via kidnapping his family, and it's such a ridiculous scheme in the best way possible. I love the scene where Mike comes up with a plan because it felt so good to see him leading the group again.
Holes?
There's a lot of planning scenes in this season, but this is easily the best one. The introduction of the Turnbow family is also really fun. Gotta love Derek laughing at his parents dying and then Tina getting stabbed by Erica. Then the montage of a house being prepped for the Demogorgon was insanely satisfying. Steve gets to use a chainsaw, the music is fire, I love everything about it. As for the trap itself, this Home Alone Looney Tunes-ass situation is so funny. Basically the same setup as the season 1 finale, amped up to 11. Easily the highlight of the season. And it ends with a really fun car chase with Steve and co crashing through fences. This is also one of Will's best episodes, and the only one of a season where Joyce feels like a real character. The scene where she gets told off by Will is really good, and this other scene where she talks about the night he vanished as well. The Will and Robin power duo also gets a lot better, with her starting to become his gay mentor, but I did find it weird that there isn't really a scene where Will reveals he's gay to her. She just starts talking about her and Vicky and then they're on the same page. This episode marks the beginning of Holly's adventure in Mr. What's-It-Land, which takes up far too much screen time, but the reveal of Max at the end genuinely surprised me and got me really excited for what's to come. I even don't mind the upside down plot in this episode. It's still the worst storyline by far, but the scene where Elle complains about beef jerky is kind of funny, and the bit where the military has them pinned behind the sign is a good little action scene. Also have no idea why Elle would come to the conclusion that Mr. Military Goon knows anything about the wall just because he pissed on it. The only bit I really dislike is Murray showing up to egg Jonathan on about proposing to Nancy. I liked Murray in the previous installments well enough, but in this season he's just annoying and I hate him. Not much else to say, I just really love this episode. It's the lowest stakes out of everything in the season, but that's maybe part of why I like it. Number 13. The Monster. This episode is a banger. Almost every scene is fantastic, with the only weak stuff being Hopper and Joyce's side mission to get info from Terry Ives. The teens plot is my favourite, with Steve witnessing an unfortunate situation through Nancy's window. The confrontation between him and Jonathan is an insanely good scene, with Steve being obviously in the wrong, but also can you really blame him? From his POV, Nancy decided to cheat on him with the sex pervert who took naked photos of her, so his crash out is pretty justified. A lot of people say Steve was a bad guy before his redemption in the last episode, but I've always loved him from the start, because even when he's being a prick, you can always see where he's coming from. And I love that he doesn't even win the fight with Jonathan, kickstarting the time-honored tradition of Steve getting beaten up worse and worse at the end of each season, minus season 5 because the Duffers can't do anything right. The kids have all split apart after the drama with the compasses, so this episode slows down a bit and spends some time with each of them before the stakes ramp up. All these scenes are superb, especially Mike and Dustin's, where Mike is given a reality check on how obsessed he's been with Eleven. This is Dustin's best episode of the season, and it's impressive how Gaten can play the silliest one of the group while also being the most logical. Will may say Mike is the heart, but in this season, Dustin is the glue trying to hold the party together. It's also fun seeing Eleven out in the world solo. This episode has a lot of the most iconic moments. Mainly the very end where she saves the boys from the bullies, which is such a goated scene. The only issue is the VFX on Mike hovering in the air looks kinda bad. This episode also officially reveals that Eleven is responsible for the gate opening, and to this day, I still don't know why touching the Demogorgon in the void creates a gate to the Upside Down. You've probably noticed that when it comes to these really good episodes, I don't have as much to say, and that's just because I find complaining to be easier than explaining why something is good. Anyways, we're in the stretch now where the rest of the episodes are all 10 out of 10s, so let's keep this ball rolling. Number 12. The Massacre at Hawkins' Lab. This is the highest rated episode of the series on IMDb, and for very good reasons. I was expecting to put it higher than I did, but there's a few things holding it back from GOAT status. This episode is really fucking long, and I found myself feeling the runtime on this last rewatch. There's a lot going on, so I'll start with my favourite plot first, that being the Upside Down shenanigans. This squad of the 4 older teens is such a fun group. They all have great chemistry together, and there's plenty of good comedic bits, especially when Steve and Eddie are complaining about Dustin. The only bit I don't really like is Eddie talking up how down bad Nancy is for Steve. Anytime the love triangle is mentioned is always the low point of the season. As for the youngins, they're chilling at the Wheeler house while the cops interrogate them. This scene is funny as hell, and I like seeing the coppers get some spotlight after being kind of benched in the last couple seasons. In fact, this is the last episode they both appear in, never to be heard from again. This plot gets really good once Erica realizes the other gang is in the Upside Down, and what follows is the best use of the 2 dimensions across the whole series. I love seeing the groups communicate through the lights, which brought back some of that season 1 whimsy. This shot in particular has been praised by just about everyone, and rightfully so because it's badass. The scene where they meet up and create the rope through the gate is also really cool. The Russian plot is the worst part, as is tradition, but at least stuff actually happens this time. Hopper and co finally battle the Demogorgon after it being teased for ages, and it's a great action scene as you would hope. You can never get enough of random people being torn apart by the things. Then Hopper and Joyce get to reunite, which fell completely flat for me. We never had a single scene at the start of a season where we got to see how much Hopper's death had affected Joyce. She seemed to be doing pretty good, all things considered. Her depression after Bob's death was way more convincing. The rest of the episode is spent in Elle's memories as the Duffers finally stop blueballing us and get to the point. It wasn't a surprise that the friendly orderly was actually number 1, and also the one responsible for the murders, but the quadruple twist of him also being Henry Creel, who is also Vecna, was pretty clever. The way we find out all this info is clunky though. Henry decides to pluck Nancy out of a Hawkins plot to show her a PowerPoint presentation of his backstory, which at the same time is also what he's explaining to Eleven. Jamie Campbell Bower crushes it in this scene, but it's funny that it takes 20 minutes to explain that Henry was just an evil kid who loved spiders and decided to start murdering things because of society, I guess. I get why he's telling Eleven all this so he can turn her to the dark side.
Join me.
No. But the only reason he's telling Nancy is so she can then tell Eleven that he's gonna blow everything up. Except she can't even tell Eleven anyway because she lives on the other side of the country, which maybe Vecna missed the memo on. I never felt worried that Nancy could die in Vecna's curse because they already have one main character cursed and definitely don't have the balls to randomly kill another. One more problem I have with this whole thing is that the season 5 reveal / retcon of Henry being influenced by the Mind Flayer all along means that this whole monologue loses some of its luster. Because from what we can tell in the cave scene, there's nothing to indicate Henry was evil prior to being infected by the scary rock, so all the evil shit he did as a kid was a result of the Mind Flayer's meddling. And to me, that makes Vecna a lot less interesting villain. It takes away all the agency from his character, and while I don't mind the idea of him being a parallel to Will, someone also possessed by the Flayer who was able to stay good, I kinda dug the concept of Vecna just being an evil child who did bad things for no real reason. It's clear to me that the Duffers were just making this shit up as they went along, but all that aside, it's still a good scene. I would normally end this segment by complaining about how lame the California plot is, but I don't have to because it isn't even in this episode. Number 11. The Pollywog. It may seem random to have an episode like this so high up, but I really love the character dynamics in this one. Mainly, everything with the party at school is awesome. I really love the addition of Max to the group, and Mike's disdain of her is dickish but so funny as well. I don't have a good reason for it, but I really like the few scenes these characters have together throughout the series. Mike's reasons for not wanting her around are valid, since he's still not over 11 turning into dust. I love this scene of the boys arguing about Dart, even if Dustin is being idiotic.
But even if he is, it doesn't automatically mean that he's bad.
That's like saying just because someone's from the Death Star doesn't make them bad.
We have a bond.
A bond? Just because he likes nougat?
Lucas contributes the least, but he does have this iconic moment.
Mr. Sinclair.
Also, Mike is wearing a really cool jumper in this episode. The one thing I will say is that it's insane Ella's wandering around the school while everyone's looking for Dart and no one sees her. This moment of her happening to see the one time Mike looks happy to see Max is so contrived. Speaking of 11, most of this episode is dedicated to catching us up on her budding relationship with Hopper, which is all excellent. These flashbacks work way better than the ones of the last episode because there's two great actors sharing the screen. The montage of them fixing up the cabin set to the Jim Crow song is fantastic, and I really love their father-daughter energy. There's also a great scene in the present day where she gets mad at him for gaslighting her on whether she's gonna see Mike again. This episode is basically the end of Nancy and Steve's relationship, since she can't say the L word to him. I guess it runs in the family. This scene with her and Jonathan, where they lament how things can't go back to how they were, is really great. Easily my favorite Jonathan scene of the season. Bob gets a bit more to do this episode, which is good because Sean Astin is legendary in this role. I like this scene of him giving Will a pep talk about facing your fears, even though that ends up being the worst possible advice in the end. There's so many great moments that add up to this being a really enjoyable episode, and it encapsulates what I love about Season 2 better than any other. It's not the best episode, but we'll get to that soon. Number 10. The Bathtub. Starting off the top 10 is the penultimate of Season 1, which flawlessly sets the stage for the finale. It begins the tradition of all of our characters coming together before the last episode, and it's always so fun to see the different groups catch each other up on their discoveries. It's also a good chance to get some interactions between characters who haven't really talked, mainly Nancy and Mike, who have a cute scene where they decide not to lie to each other anymore, and then immediately lie to each other. This is also the last time they have a meaningful conversation until Season 5. This is also the first time Joyce and Elle interact, a relationship that will be present for the rest of the show, but unfortunately they never gave them enough scenes to really get an idea of their dynamic. There's so many little moments in this episode that I love, like Mike's reaction when Lucas thinks Nancy would set them up, and Ted's reaction to 11.
You think my son is hiding this girl?
What happened to her hair?
Also gotta shout out Mr. Clark for pausing his movie date to teach Dustin how to make a sensory deprivation tank. And of course, we have the beginning of Steve's redemption arc, after he realizes he's been on the villain team all along. Such a great turn for his character. I love this bit when he helps clean off a graffiti at the theater. They could have easily had Steve just be the asshole boyfriend trope, but Joe Keery was so charismatic that they had no choice but to turn it around and make him the most beloved character. I could mention the other stuff going on in this episode, but I don't have anything to say beyond it's good, and this ain't a recap, so let's move on. Number 9. The Case of the Missing Lifeguard. You probably didn't expect anything from Season 3 to get this far when I've been hating on it non-stop, but this episode has always been one of my favorites. It's the one time this season where pretty much all the characters feel true to themselves, there's actual good drama and conversations, the dialogue isn't stupid, and it just feels different from the rest. For one thing, the whole episode is set during a thunderstorm, which immediately makes it stand out in this summer season. The Max and 11 duo continues, and I very much enjoy their detective mission to find out what's going on with Billy. Their dynamic is super entertaining, and the mystery is actually somewhat engaging for once, because we don't see Billy or Heather in the flesh until the end of the episode, and the reveal of Nancy's boss being her dad is a cool way to tie together those disconnected plotlines. That scene where Elle and Max find them having dinner is my favorite of the episode, because the vibes are so off with how Billy's acting, and I remember watching and thinking, I have no idea where this is going. As for the boys, Will's finally had it with Mike's BS and they have a yelling match, which is another of the best scenes of the season. It's the only time the writers give Will some compelling drama this season, with him feeling out of place in the group not just because of his sexuality, but because he basically lost a year of his life to upside down shenanigans, and now all his friends have grown up and left him in the dust. Noah Schnapp is crazy good in this scene and when he destroys Castle Byers. It's a shame the storyline is completely dropped after this episode, so he can spend the rest of his season touching his neck. The biggest shock of all is that the adults plot is seriously good in this episode. Hopper is acting like himself for once. The scene of him and Joyce in the lab is amazing. It's one of the few times characters talk about how the trauma of past events has affected them, and the performances are great as expected. The Scoops plot isn't as engaging as what I've talked about so far, but it does have some cool moments like Robin cracking the code, and a great scene of Dustin lecturing Steve on how he should stop thinking about his social status and focus on the manic dream girl in front of him. What ties this episode together is how good the direction is. Like, this might be the best directed episode of a show. I hate to give Sean Levy praise, but unfortunately this episode is full of cool looking shots, some really sick transitions, and the way it's all put together just feels elevated above the usual fare. The score also fucks hard throughout the whole thing, especially when Max and Elle are biking to Heather's joint. Number 8. Holly Jolly. This one is an absolute classic. One of the most iconic scenes of a show is here, that being Joyce using the Christmas lights to commune with Will. It's a brilliant moment that proves the Duffers are capable of creating their own iconography beyond just 80s nostalgia and references. The one downside being that they try their hardest to replicate that magic in later seasons and never quite get there. But the best scene of not just the episode, but maybe the whole season, is the ending where Will's body is discovered. The way this whole sequence is edited together with that amazing cover of Heroes by Peter Gabriel is superb, and genuinely emotional as well. All the kids, especially Finn, are incredible in this scene, not to mention David Harbour. Hopper spends this episode deep in the Hawkins lab conspiracies.
Isn't that the 6th and 7th we're seeing here?
Meaning we get some library research time, which I always love seeing. This scene with him and Marissa is hilarious as well. David Harbour is so good at stuff like this.
I'm sorry. Maybe we could go out again next week. The librarian.
The teens plot is great as well, with Jonathan getting called out for being a pervert because he had the bright idea to develop his porn photos during school when anyone could come in. Steve is at his most asshole-ish here, but like I said before, I feel like he's pretty justified considering the circumstances. Nancy never seems to care too much about it other than one scene in a future episode, but I guess if Jonathan wasn't a perv, then they never would have discovered the Demogorgon. Speaking of, this episode is when we start to get a good look at it, and while the CG is dodgy, it's such a great monster design that I can look past it. I'd like to see what a practical version would look like. It'd be more retro for sure, but maybe it would have been too silly. This is also the first time we see the Upside Down, which we take for granted these days, but is such a cool looking place. In the early seasons, the Upside Down was so mysterious, and it felt like there was endless potential for stories and lore. The kids spend this episode traipsing around in the woods looking for Will, so we get lots of cute scenes with Mike and Elle getting to know each other, and more of the party's dynamic in general. I like the scene where they're gearing up for their adventure and all Dustin's brought is snacks, which is actually a smart move because walking around in the woods all day without food is definitely not the move.
Coming!
Number 7.
Dear Billy.
In a way, this is season 4's Holly Jolly, an early episode of a season that gives us an instantly iconic moment, while also acting as a mini climax for some of the story threads. Many will tell you this is the best episode, and while I obviously don't agree, I can't deny that parts of it hit harder than anything else in the show. It's the closest we have to a standalone episode outside of the Lost Sister nonsense, which makes it feel a bit more special. The ending is what most people remember, but the earlier stuff of Max having to reckon with her impending death is low-key even better. The scene with her mum is great, even if it does end up being a Vecna troll. They really fumbled by having Max's mum just disappear after this episode. Like, we never see her reaction to her daughter being in a coma. She really should have popped up somewhere in season 5. My favourite scene is this talk with Max and Lucas, which hits hard.
I don't need a letter. I don't want a letter. Just talk to me. To your friends. We're right here. I'm right here.
We do get to hear Billy's letter, of course, another great scene thanks entirely to Sadie Sink's fabulous work. The scene would be better if Billy was a good character, but the writers do a fine job of making us care anyway. Everything from the moment Kate Bush starts playing to the end is outstanding, even if I didn't really think Max was gonna die, but the scene is so epic that you get swept up in it regardless. The flashbacks to all her happy moments actually enhance the scene unlike most other uses of them in the show. It's silly that Vecna barely tries to stop her beyond some falling debris, but other than that, I have no notes. The ending shot of the group silhouetted with that gorgeous arrangement of running up that hill is impeccable. As for the rest of the episode, the California plot is crazy good as well, now with 11 out of the picture. She isn't even in this episode, which is crazy considering Millie is the star of the show. Will and Mike get some really good moments together, mainly this talk where Mike addresses how lame his character has become, and Will tries really hard to hide how down bad he is for him. This stuff is all great, but then out of nowhere, this insane one-take shootout happens, which I don't think anyone expected. This scene is fucking awesome, and it's way better than the Oner and Sorcerer, if you ask me. At least with this one, we didn't know it was coming, so there was more novelty compared to Sorcerer where it was in every single trailer. As for the Russia plot, well, it's not terrible, but it's the ultimate example of how much the writers needed to spin its wheels to make it last the whole season. Hopper spends the whole episode escaping from a prison and hiding out with a peanut butter stash, and it ends with him getting recaptured immediately and put right back where he was. Similarly, Joyce and Murray arrive at Yuri's only to immediately get drugged and shipped off to Russia. I do like Yuri, by the way. His shtick works way better than Argyle's if you ask me. It's all just a big waste of time which ends up dragging an otherwise fantastic episode down. Number 6. The Vanishing of Will Byers. Here we are, the very first episode. It cannot be understated how perfectly this episode sets up a world of Stranger Things, while being endlessly rewatchable at the same time. I don't even know how many times I've watched this, and it never gets old. The first scenes before the intro in particular are flawless. There's an evil monster in the lab, the boys play D&D, there's a catchy soundtrack, Will goes missing, boom, credits. And that intro, man is it good. Probably my favourite TV theme song after Twin Peaks. The music and the moving letters capture that 80s vibe flawlessly. The music as a whole, both soundtrack and score, is one of the show's strongest attributes. It's obviously inspired by Carpenter, but it's not just an imitation and manages to have an identity of its own. The kids' theme especially, it's so good. Continuing with great character introductions, our first scene with Hopper is my favourite of the episode. I love a good morning routine, and by the end we have a solid idea of who this guy is without any dialogue. Love all the scenes of him and his cop buddies. The dialogue is funny and informative at the same time. The only problem I have with the exposition is that the Duffers felt the need to have some random character tell Mr. Clark and the audience that Hopper's daughter is dead, which we could very easily infer ourselves after he acts cagey when asked what class she's in. And if the audience is too stupid to figure that out, then just dole out the information throughout the rest of the season like you already did anyway. A bizarre blemish on an otherwise perfect episode. Nancy and Steve's budding romance is cute, I love the studying scene, and everything with Eleven is great too. The Duffers waste no time letting you know that this show about kids isn't afraid to get serious, with Elle kirking both of these guys effortlessly. Also gotta shout out Benny, who's only here for this episode but leaves a lasting impression much like Barb. The only character who doesn't really get his due is Jonathan, but we get plenty of him in the following episodes, so it's not a big deal. Not much else to say, it's an effective way to start the show and got all of us hooked instantly. Number 5. My pick for best season 4 episode isn't what I expected, but on this last rewatch I was blown away by how amazing this one is. Mainly, everything going on with Eleven and Brenna is outstanding. This is the best episode for both of them by far. The confrontation between the two where Elle calls him out for being the true villain all along is so bloody good, because not only are the performances from both actors next level, but the Duffers pull some elite level retconning that reframes Elle's void searches not as hunting random Soviets, but actually looking for Henry, therefore making Brenna the ultimate culprit behind all the shit that's happened, even if it was somewhat accidental.
The gate. The mind flare. So many dead. And all because of you. Because you could not stop.
The one thing that always distracts me is when Elle refers to the mind flayer, at which point Brenna should have said, "What the hell is a mind flayer?" The earlier scene where he establishes how much of a threat Henry is also rocks. Matthew Modine is just so good at talking. It's so satisfying to see Elle finally stand up against Brenna, and the way his story ends with her not letting him have his redemptive moment is glorious. I had doubts when he was brought back this season, but they brought so much more depth to both him and Elle that it ended up being one of the best parts of the season. Unfortunately after this, Elle didn't really have much to do in the final season, since this is basically the end of her character arc, so wrapping up this storyline here maybe wasn't the best idea. The orchestral arrangement of Eleven's theme during this scene is also straight fire, and destroying that helicopter is her most badass moment of the series. The California team finally gets to be useful, mainly giving us this tragic scene of Will showing Mike his painting. It's a cute scene, but Mike's total obliviousness to his BFF crying right next to him is so distracting. As for the Russia plot, it's a total nothing burger beyond the novelty of all the characters finally being together. I already mentioned how dumb it is that they just leave the mind flayer particles in that box, and I'm not even going to question how the hell the Russians got that in there, or why they even have it at all. The rest of the episode is dedicated to putting all the chips in place for the finale, and we get heaps of nice character moments before shit hits the fan. Max and Lucas, Lucas and Erica, Eddie and Dustin, Steve and Robin, everyone gets cute little heart-to-hearts. My favourite is Steve's fantasy about travelling the country with his 6 nuggets, which I hope we'll see in the Stranger Things 25 Years Later series. There's also a side mission to the war zone to pick up weapons and whatnot. Really loved this whole sequence, especially Nancy's scene with Jason. The ending montage with the Separate Ways remix is cringe, but it did get me hyped for the finale, much more than the bridge ever did, that's for sure. Number 4. The Body. I don't see anyone talking about this episode, which is a shame because it's peak. After the last episode ended on such a depressing note, this one picks up the pace and has heaps of exciting discoveries, plus loads of fun character moments. Most of the wacky stuff comes from the kids giving Elle a makeover so they can get her into the school, which leads to this hilarious scene with them and Mr. Clark.
Where are you from, exactly?
Bad place.
Sweden. I have a lot of Swedish family.
The scenes of Elle getting dressed up and the party biking to school are so fun, and Millie is so funny as 11. If you watch her whenever she's in a group scene, she's always doing something amusing. The really good stuff is Hopper's plot, who starts to fall down the conspiracy rabbit hole when something is sus about Will's body. I love all these scenes of him investigating, especially when he's playing the moves on this government guy at the bar. David Harbour's charisma carries these scenes hard, especially this bit when he just gives up and punches this guy.
I say O'Bannon? I meant... Okay.
He's radiating serious Harrison Ford energy, which was probably intentional. Joyce is really going through it, considering she knows Will is alive, but everyone thinks she's Delulu, and Winona Ryder does great work as always. The part where she talks to Will through a hole in the wall is pretty random. You could tell the Duffers were playing fast and loose with the rules of the Upside Down, because this never happens again. She also has this fantastic scene with Jonathan, where they have a screaming match in public. The performances are so good. Winona Ryder used to be the star of this show, believe it or not. Jonathan has to go shopping for a casket, which is pretty heavy for a 16-year-old. Him and Nancy begin their team up after she sees the Demogorgon in the photo, and the scene with her and Karen is really good as well. This episode is just so good, and encapsulates everything that makes season 1 special. Number 3. The Gate. These last 3 episodes are what I would consider the goats of Stranger Things. The season 2 finale holds a special place in my heart for being the first time I had to wait after finishing an episode, but beyond that, it's a perfect ending to a damn good season. All the characters have their purpose in the story, some more than others, and the last scene is the best of the entire series by far. My favourite plotline is Steve in full-time babysitter mode with the kids, and his confrontation with Billy. Their beef was brewing all season, so their face-off is super fun to watch. It sucks to see Steve get beat up, but it's tradition, so it's all good. This episode is what fully catapulted him to fan favorite meme legend status, with his no bullshit mum attitude. Max standing up to Billy is satisfying as well. It's just a shame that season 3 didn't follow up on the tension between them or with Steve. The adventure in the tunnels is fun, but I will say the dart thing is insanely stupid, easily the worst part of the episode. I wish we had a one-on-one scene with Max and Mike in this episode, where he would apologize for being rude to her and accept her into the party, because he obviously did warm up to her at some point, but we never really saw that. Eleven and Hopper's mission to close the gate has some good moments, mainly their heart-to-heart in the car, which is wonderful. Anytime David Harbour gets a monologue about how depressed Hopper is, he nails it. Elle closing the gate is a cool scene as well, and is the last time I'll let them get away with resolving the conflict by having Elle point at a thing until it dies. The least compelling of these plots is the Byers plus Nancy exercising Will. It's fine, but doesn't hold a candle to everything else going on. A bizarre scene that shouldn't work but does is Billy chatting up Karen after the cold open. In a vacuum, this scene is hilarious and showcases how much charisma Dacre Montgomery brings to his lame-ass character. My problem is that the Duffers kept it going in season 3 when it should have stayed as a one-off funny moment. So far, this episode might not sound as good as I was saying, but it's everything after the climax that elevates it so far up the list. The snowball is not just the best ending to any season, but the best scene of the show, period. It's such a perfect representation of that middle school coming of age vibe that I love so much. And after all the supernatural shit these kids have gone through, it's nice to see them just go to the school dance and have dramas more appropriate to their age. You really feel for Dustin here, who kinda got shafted the whole season with his crush on Max getting cucked by Lucas. Nancy being the one to cheer him up is a great callback to the very first episode, where it was shown the two of them used to have a friendship. Will hooking up with this random chick is awkward, but it'd probably be worse if he was the only one without a partner. And lastly, Mike finally gets that happy ending with Elle they talked about in the first season. The show could have ended here and I would have been completely satisfied. It's such a high note to end on, and that last sting of the Mind Flayer still lurking about is the perfect little tease to keep people wanting more. Number 2. The Upside Down. The finale of Season 1 is a flawless conclusion, simple as that. I know I said this about Seasons 2 and 3, but they could have ended the show here and it'd be perfect. Everything is wrapped up in a satisfying manner, with just a few open threads to leave people speculating. I'm glad the show continued, but if this was it, I don't think anyone would have complained. After the previous episode united all three age groups, this episode splits them back off to resolve each of their story arcs. Hopper and Joyce venture into the Upside Down to find Will, Nancy and Jonathan face off against the Demogorgon, and the kids also face off against the Demogorgon. Hopper and Joyce's plot is the heaviest, since we finally get to see what ended up happening with Jim's daughter through very appropriate flashbacks. All these scenes are incredibly depressing, and Sarah's death being intercut with Will being brought back to life is an amazing scene, with that Moby song tying it all together. It gives Hopper a much more personal stake in the story, and cements him as the best character of the season. The teens' plot is more straightforward, with them enacting their plan against the demo. The best part is Steve showing up to have his hero moment, and aura farming with the trusty nail bat. My one issue with this plot is that the teens don't end up killing the monster, and it leaves to get killed by 11 instead. I understand they needed it at the school so the government guys could get mauled, but it feels off to have Nancy and Jonathan's entire storyline being about fighting the Demogorgon, and then they don't even get to kill it. Finally, the government comes for the kids, but are thwarted by Elle and the Demogorgon. The moment where the boys stand up for Elle and are ready to die for her is so cute, especially for Lucas, who was hating on her all season.
Eat shit!
It's ridiculous that Brenner takes a full-on body shot from a demo but manages to get out basically unscathed, but that's not this episode's problem, so I won't complain about it. Eleven's not death is really powerful, and works so much better than her death in Season 5, because at least here she's sacrificing herself to save her friends and stop the monster, instead of just deciding to stop living after the day is already won. This episode is equal parts tragic and euphoric, because while they do save Will and kill the Demogorgon, Barb is still dead, Elle turned into dust, Hopper is under the government's thumb, and Will has PTSD visions and vomits up pollywogs. It's a great way to end the season, and was damn close to being my number one pick, if it weren't for one other episode that's been my favorite for years. Number 1. The Mind Flayer. This is everything I love about Stranger Things distilled into one episode. It's basically 2 episodes in one, with the first half being the thrilling escape from Hawkins' lab, and the second being the regroup and usual penultimate setup. This is Bob Newby's moment in the spotlight, and man does Sean Astin kill it. It does end in his untimely demise, but Bob was doomed from the second he showed up, so I'm glad he got to go out on a high note. It's unbelievably stupid that he decides to stand there and gawk at Joyce instead of booking it for the exit, but that's just what had to happen. This whole sequence of him and the others trapped in the lab is brimming with tension, because this was still in the early stages of the show before we realized that no main characters would ever die. The shenanigans going on outside are just as fun, with the kids plus Steve catching up with Nancy and Jonathan. I love all the drama between Lucas, Max, and Dustin.
You told a stranger the truth!
A stranger?
Once everyone reconvenes at the buyer's house, there's plenty of fun exposition as we learn about the Mind Flayer, and whenever Steve chimes in, it's comedy gold.
It believes it's the master race.
Like the Germans?
The Nazis?
Yeah, the Nazis.
Hopper's constant annoyance of the kids' D&D bullshit is always funny as well.
6767.
The rest of the episode is the gang trying to get info out of a possessed Will, featuring some great monologues from Jonathan, Mike, and Joyce, and not one, but 2 killer montages of everyone setting up the shed and then chatting up Will while he gives them Morse code. I will say this whole plan to not let the Mind Flayer know where they are is kind of chopped when you realize they're doing this at the number 1 most obvious place for them to be, Will's house. Anyway, the last few minutes after the phone rings to when Elle shows up is so good. I remember feeling genuinely tense until 11 comes strutting through the door. Insanely hype and aura-filled moment, and Mike's face when he sees her is the stuff of legends. I don't have a single problem with this episode beyond the minor shit I already mentioned, and to this day, it's still my favorite episode of Stranger Things. At long last, that's my ranking of every Stranger Things episode. This one was a long time coming. Ever since I started making these videos, I knew I wanted to do one on this show. And I've had a lot of thoughts floating around in my head over the past 9 years, so I did my best to get everything out there. This video took longer to make than expected, thanks to me being homeless during the process, but I'm happy with how it turned out and I hope you are too. I know the internet hates this show now, but even with the last season being kinda mid, it's still a special one for me. So hopefully this episode reminded you that when Stranger Things is good, it's really fucking good. Thanks as always to Quinn the GM for throwing in his thoughts. I know he's in like all my videos now, but how can you not love him? If this video somehow isn't enough, and you want even more of me yapping about this show, check out my appearances on Cinebad's Behind the Screen podcast, where we covered each volume of Season 5 plus more. You can also check out my serialized profile if you want to see my ratings for every episode and on other shows as well. Well, that's all I've got for today. It's time at last to put Stranger Things back on the shelf and move on to greener pastures.